My mother-in-law faked cheating photos and framed me for theft. When I got pregnant, she wrote, "Now I'll take what's growing inside you." My mother-in-law has always thought I was beneath her son. She dubbed me a gold digger at my birthday dinner when I paid for her food. I threw a tantrum because my $2,500 engagement ring was too pricey. When I realized the difference, she immediately replaced my work clothing with Walmart knockoffs and presented it as proof I was out for my husband's money. But when her kid continued to love me and told her that nothing would change, she got this expression in her eye. The next week, I noticed the same automobile following me everywhere I went, including outside my office, the gym, and the grocery store. When I told my spouse I was being followed, he dismissed it as paranoia. Then one day I returned home and saw a manila folder on my coffee table. Private investigator reports that cover 3 months of my life. Every individual I spoke with, every area I went, was twisted to appear suspicious. The PI noted that my male coworker bought me coffee, indicating that we were having an affair. My trips to the bank provided evidence of concealed accounts. She asked me to find these reports. The jewelry incident occurred during Easter supper. Miel screamed that her grandmother's bracelet was missing as I helped remove the table. She made a huge show of looking before telling us to check purses. Naturally, the bracelet belonged to me. I saw my husband's expression alter as she pulled it out. That glimmer of doubt shattered something in me. Miel gently said that she would not press charges because we all make errors, while the family looked at me as if I were trash. 2 weeks later, she asked me to lunch. I assumed she wanted to apologize, but instead she pushed a check across the table. $50,000. When I didn't react, she wrote another one. $75,000, then $100,000. "Every woman has a price," she explained. "Name yours." She informed me that she had already done this effectively. I wasn't the most attractive gold digger her son had dated. Apparently, the final straw occurred during a family meal in September. Mill had been unusually sweet for 2 weeks, which should have alerted me. She suggested we share images from our recent family beach trip. She connected her phone to the television. The first several images were normal. Then all of a sudden, I found myself kissing another man. I took multiple photos with this stranger at restaurants and places I'd never been to. The shadows were incorrect, and the metadata would have shown that they were false, but nobody noticed while marveling at the images on the large screen. She delivered an entire speech on safeguarding her son and obeying her maternal instincts. It turned out she had already shown these images to my husband's coworkers and acquaintances. She'd shielded him from the truth about his adulterous wife. I tried to defend myself, but she had prepared everyone wonderfully. The trek to my car, with the family whispering behind me, was the longest of my life. My husband requested some space to contemplate during the drive home. That's when I knew that was always her plan. She would never stop since destroying me was a part of her personality. Now, sitting in my car, watching him walk into our house without me, I made a decision. If she wanted to play with family secrets, we would do so. I hired my own investigator to look into her background. It took him 2 months to find the gold mine. Her husband's nephew bore no resemblance to his claimed father, but he did have her characteristic nose and green eyes. The time frame was very interesting. She had given birth to her first child 6 months early, but the cousin was 6 months older. The affair that resulted in him occurred when her spouse was on a business trip. I spent months as the defeated daughter-in-law. I apologized for the misunderstanding over the images. I thanked her for accepting me back into the family. Then, over Thanksgiving, I suggested a festive family activity for Christmas. Those ancestry DNA tests were really popular, and wouldn't it be incredible to trace the family bloodline? I played right into her ego by emphasizing how important family legacy was. She couldn't refuse without appearing suspicious. On Christmas morning, I handed out beautifully wrapped 23andMe kits to everyone. Miel tried to grin, but I could see panic in her eyes. The following 2 months were fantastic. The family group chat erupted with enthusiasm as members received their results. Everyone shares their ancestry percentages and locates distant relatives. Then the bomb dropped. The cousins' results revealed a half-sibling match with my husband. My father-in-law peered at the TV, unable to absorb what he was seeing. The remaining family members compared the results and confirmed the match. The mathematics was undeniable. Mill tried to claim that the test was incorrect, but science does not lie like she does. Watching her ideal family image disintegrate as she painfully sought to explain was poetic justice. Her husband had moved out within a week. The divorce papers mentioned infidelity and fraud. The family divided, with the majority cutting her off for her decades of hypocrisy. My spouse often apologized for questioning me. Family gatherings were shifted to our home, where she was not invited. I believed I had won. My birth control failed despite my precautions. The positive pregnancy test arrived at my office with roses. The card said, "Congratulations, grandmother knows." An untraceable text followed. "You took my family. Now I'll take what grows inside you and raise it properly." Blood is blood. She'd been playing a far longer game than I expected. My palms trembled as I glanced at the cards. The office suddenly felt too small and vulnerable. My coworker, Natalie, spotted my expression and ran over, but I waved her away and grabbed my purse. I needed to go home. The driving became a whirl of checking mirrors and making random turns. Each automobile behind me may be one of hers. At home, I locked the door and drew all of the curtains closed. My spouse discovered me seated on the bathroom floor 20 minutes later. The pregnancy test was still in my palm. He knelt alongside me, and I showed him the text. His visage shifted through many emotions before settling on fury. He contacted his mother immediately, but she did not respond. Then his phone vibrated with a message from her. "Congratulations on the baby. I can't wait to be involved every step of the journey." That night, we replaced the locks and built a security system. My husband took time off work to be with me. We altered our habits and avoided typical patterns, but she remained one step ahead. Baby things began arriving at our house with no return address, including a crib and a high chair, all of which were of high quality and impossible to trace. The psychological warfare escalated rapidly. She somehow obtained my work email and emailed congrats to the entire office, revealing my pregnancy before I had even seen a doctor. My supervisor called me aside to discuss maternity leave while I was still processing things. She had snatched my opportunity to communicate the news on my own terms. Then came medical intervention. I arrived at my first prenatal checkup to find she had already called, claiming to be me and attempting to get my medical information. When I checked in, the receptionist looked puzzled because I had just called to cancel. We spent an hour validating my identification and adding password security to my information. My husband confronted her at her apartment. I sat in the car, observing through the window as they argued. She stood there smiling and denying everything. When he returned, his hands shook. She'd decorated a full nursery in her spare room, had already chosen names, and informed him that she'd been consulting with lawyers regarding grandparent rights. The family was divided over how to handle her. Some relatives believed we were overreacting to a grandmother's excitement. Others had seen her ruin enough lives to know better. My father-in-law, who was still recovering from the divorce, volunteered to help in any way he could. He discovered years' worth of covert credit cards and accounts. She has resources we didn't expect. Week after week, her tactics became more daring. She arrived at my workplace with baby gifts, pressuring me to accept them in front of coworkers, or appear ungrateful. She joined every pregnant group and forum I created, constantly commenting directly after me. When I swapped groups, she found them as well. The breaking point occurred during my second trimester. I'd been cautious. Be careful. But somehow she found out about my doctor's visit. She entered the waiting area and took a seat next to me. I just smiled and picked up a parenting magazine. When they called my name, she also stood up. The nurse seems puzzled. As we approached, my mother-in-law kindly explained that she was here to support her daughter-in-law. I clearly informed them that she was not permitted to attend my appointment. She created a spectacle over being excluded from her grandchild's life, which was audible throughout the waiting area. Security had to accompany her out as she wailed about wanting to participate. That night, my husband and I devised a plan. If she chose to escalate, we'd be prepared. We began documenting everything. Every communication, unpleasant gift and appearance. We installed cameras throughout our property, updated all of our passwords, and placed alerts on our credit reports. But she also adapted. Instead, the gifts began to arrive at my husband's job. She befriended our neighbors, often inquiring about me and expressing worry for my health. She volunteered at the hospital where I intended to deliver. She got on the auxiliary board. She countered every move we made. My sister-in-law, Natalie, proved to be an unexpected ally. She had spent years watching her mother operate and was familiar with her tendencies. She cautioned us about the following phase. My mother-in-law attempted to separate me from my support system. Sure enough, anonymous notes began arriving at my acquaintances' houses, warning them of my alleged mental instability during pregnancy. The majority of friends saw through it, but some drifted aloof. My book group suddenly experienced scheduling issues anytime I was able to attend. I'm curious what motivates this mother-in-law to invest so much time and money in this situation. The private investigator, the false images, and now baby items. That's a lot of effort simply because she dislikes her daughter-in-law. My yoga instructor noted that someone had called to express concern about my exercising while pregnant. She was gradually shrinking my universe, until just she remained. Stress was having an impact on my health. My doctor remarked that my blood pressure was high. I couldn't sleep and jumped at every sound. My husband added motion sensors and additional cameras. However, technology could not stop psychological warfare. She was too intelligent to engage in anything that might be legally construed as harassment. Then we found her latest plot by chance. Daniel, my husband's cousin, and her secret son, became horrified with her after discovering the truth. He reached out, hoping to help. He had overheard her on the phone with someone, talking about nursing homes and power of attorney. She was looking into how to declare me incompetent owing to pregnancy-related mental health difficulties. The knowledge about her competency plot chilled my veins. I quickly made an appointment with my obstetrician to document my mental health state. My spouse joined me on every appointment, establishing a record of my stability and sensible decision-making. The doctor took note of everything in my file, knowing the gravity of the issue. After I outlined the harassment pattern, Daniel proved to be beneficial. In the following weeks, he began seeing his mother on a regular basis, claiming to reconcile while gathering intelligence. We learned from him that she had been speaking with a psychiatrist friend regarding postpartum psychosis symptoms, with the intention of using this angle after the birth. She'd even looked into which courts in our area were most sensitive to grandparent rights issues. My husband's work schedule grew unpredictable as he attempted to strike a balance between protecting me and preserving our finances. His mother began showing up at his office during critical meetings, forcing him to pick between his job and dealing with her interruptions. His supervisor, while first tolerant, became impatient with the continuous interruptions. The financial burden exacerbated an already stressful situation. Natalie proposed that we should be on the offense rather than just protecting. She'd been chronicling her mother's actions for years, including details of manipulation tactics used on other family members. We worked together to construct a detailed file that documented a decades-long history of harassment. Former girlfriends that my spouse had lost contact with suddenly made sense. They'd all been turned off by similar campaigns. The 20th week of my pregnancy marked a new development. I awoke to find our mailbox overflowing with pamphlets from adoption organizations. The message was plain. She wanted me to question my abilities to be a mother. My husband put a lockable mailbox the same day, but the psychological harm had already been done. Every usual pregnancy anxiety became exaggerated as I wondered if she was correct about my parenting abilities. Our neighbors became unsuspecting pawns in her scheme. She'd become friends with the elderly couple next door, bringing them groceries and checking in on them every day. They thought she was amazing, not realizing she was asking them for information about our routines. When packages arrived, she'd intercept them in the name of being helpful, always knowing exactly what we'd ordered and when. My work performance decreased as I struggled to focus. Projects that would typically take hours turned into days as I continually watched surveillance footage on my phone. My supervisor expressed concern, which further added to my mother-in-law's story about my failing mental health. I forced myself to compartmentalize and refused to give her fodder for her competency allegations. Daniel learned her next move from a carelessly opened laptop. She had been communicating with a family law attorney about creating a paper trail for future custody disputes. Every present she had sent, every attempt to get involved, was being chronicled as proof of her dedication to the baby's well-being. Our resistance to recognize her involvement was turning into paranoid behavior on our side. The baby shower became a battleground. My buddies organized a modest gathering in an attempt to create a regular time amid the pandemonium. She somehow figured out the location and time. She did not disrupt the celebration, this would have been too clear. Instead, she sent an exquisite gift basket which came during the gift opening ceremony and contained considerably more expensive items than anything my friends had donated. The card said, "With love from Grandma," in her unmistakable handwriting. My partner began to sleep poorly, resulting in persistent black circles beneath his eyes. He put an app on his phone that connected to all of our security cameras and checked it obsessively all night. Our connection weakened due to the continual scrutiny. Date nights turned into strategy sessions. Security alerts interrupted romantic moments. She was killing our marriage without ever physically touching either of us. Natalie told us that the holiday season was approaching. Her mother would always escalate during family gatherings, relying on tradition and witnesses to coerce compliance. Thanksgiving loomed like a thundercloud. Family members who had remained neutral began reaching out, urging us to explore reconciliation for the sake of the baby. The pressure increased from all sides. I formed a support group of other women who had faced with nasty in-laws. Their stories offered both comfort and horror. Some had eventually reached an agreement, while others had been fighting for years. They taught me documentation procedures and legal protections I had no idea existed. One woman described how her mother-in-law obtained partial custody by presenting herself as a stable alternative to a neurotic mother. During his reconnaissance visits, my husband's cousin divulged even more troubling information. His mother had been attending grandparents' support groups, portraying herself as a victim of an ungrateful daughter-in-law who was preventing her from seeing her grandchild. She had formed a network of sympathetic allies who were unaware of her actual character. Some even offered to serve as character witnesses if she took legal action. Stress expressed physically as my pregnancy proceeded, headaches became constant companions. When I did get any sleep, it was accompanied by nightmares about her snatching my baby. My doctor prescribed minor anxiety meds that were safe to take throughout pregnancy, which I knew she would use against me if she found out. Every medical decision was weighed against potential legal repercussions. We discovered she'd been volunteering in the hospital's maternity unit for months, gaining favor with the nurses. She had grown particularly close to one nurse who worked in the birth unit, sharing anecdotes about her difficult daughter-in-law, who was keeping her from her grandchild. The notion that she might have allies there at my most vulnerable times threw me into a panic attack that took hours to subside. My husband faced his extended family, explaining the entire extent of her harassment. Some family now recognized the gravity of the situation, while others continued to believe we were overreacting. The family divide worsened as holiday plans became a quagmire of negotiations and bruised feelings. She played the victim brilliantly, a grandmother who only wanted to adore her granddaughter. Financial strain intensified as security measures depleted our funds. The nursery we envisioned became a fortress, with window locks and camera angles taking precedent over decor. Every dollar spent on protection was money not set aside for our child's future. She'd devised a means to rob our child before they were born. Daniel's intelligence collection revealed her most diabolical strategy yet. She had been investigating childcare courses and qualifications, putting together a resume that would make her look to be the more qualified caregiver. She even started working part-time at a daycare center to get professional childcare experience. Every move was planned to put herself in the best possible position if custody was ever called into question. My body altered as the pregnancy progressed, but I was unable to appreciate the miracle of creation. Each kick reminded me of what she intended to steal. Shopping for infant clothes becomes a reconnaissance expedition, looking for her automobile in parking lots and avoiding predictable stores. The thrill of getting ready for our child was marred by constant hypervigilance. Work became my main escape, but even that was threatened. She had began sending flowers to my office on a weekly basis, signed by your beloved mother-in-law. Colleagues thought it was sweet, not realizing the psychological toll each bouquet represented. I couldn't refuse them without appearing ungrateful. Could not explain without appearing paranoid. The 7th month saw a horrifying intensification. I was at home alone when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I noticed a woman I didn't recognize holding official-looking documents. She described herself as a social worker responding to a call regarding an at-risk pregnancy. Someone had indicated that I was in extreme mental distress and would endanger my unborn child. My hands shook as I dialed my husband's number, who had raced home from work. The social worker was professional yet thorough, checking our home and inquiring about my mental health history. She discovered nothing untoward, but the visit became part of the official record. My mother-in-law had devised a strategy to involve authorities without explicitly implicating herself. Natalie used her connections to assist us track down the complaint. It had been made anonymously through a tip line, thus it was hard to determine who had phoned. The social worker's report exonerated us, but the probe remained in the system. With this precedent established, any future complaints will be considered more seriously. She had prepared the groundwork for future attacks while retaining plausible deniability. Social workers are at the door, checking on your mental health. Mother-in-laws are playing chess while everyone else is fixated on checkers. However, utilizing child services as pawns appears to be a new low, even in her playbook. My husband's relationship with his mother had reached a breaking point. He drove to her apartment one evening and returned hours later, emotionally exhausted. She'd spent the entire time playing victim, wailing about missing her grandchild's development and showing him the nursery she'd set up. She even purchased a car seat for her vehicle in case of an emergency. Her illusion was so strong that she appeared to believe she was the aggrieved person. Sleep deprivation became more severe as my due date approached. Every night, I'd wake up several times to check the locks and cameras. My husband started sleeping in shifts, with one of us always on watch. The nursery remained half-finished because we prioritized security over looks. What should have been a period of joyous expectation turned into a siege mindset. She found methods to get around every barrier we put. We stopped her calls, so she utilized burner phones. When our routines changed, she adjusted her surveillance. She would infiltrate even the places we thought were safe. Her resources were limitless. Her determination was absolute. Fighting her was like battling smoke. She would evaporate just to resurface somewhere. The baby shower presents she sent haunted our house. We couldn't use them since we knew they were manipulative. But donating them felt like accepting defeat. They sat in our garage, pricey reminders of her existence. Each fashionable dress and high-end toy reflected another attempt to establish her claim on our child. My already stretched support system began to crack. Friends grew tired of the turmoil, unable to understand why we couldn't simply work things out with her. Family members who had initially backed us began suggesting compromises. The solitude she had planned was working. Even those who believed us became fatigued from the perpetual crisis mode. Daniel advised us that she was intensifying her legal preparations. She hired a well-known family law attorney who specializes in aggressive grandparent rights litigation. Her volunteer efforts, character witnesses and documented gift-giving had created a strong case for a loved grandma who was refused access. Our defensive actions were being seen as proof of our fragility. The 36th week of pregnancy came fresh anxieties. Labor was coming, and despite our efforts, she had established herself at the hospital. We discovered that she had been delivering treats to the maternity unit staff on a weekly basis, and had become a cherished fixture. The caregivers spoke affectionately of the sweet grandma, who only wanted to be a part of her grandchild's life. My spouse visited with hospital security to discuss the incident and provide evidence of the harassment. They pledged to limit her access during the delivery, but their sympathies were evident with the tearful grandma who had showed them baby images and recounted her grief. We recognized we couldn't rely on institutional protection after she spent months developing ties there. Natalie proposed an extreme measure: deliver at a different hospital. We explored facilities in nearby towns, hoping to find one where she didn't have connections. The logistics were hard, increasing the distance between us and our support system, but it appeared to be our only chance for a smooth birth. My mother-in-law must have sensed our plans. The gifts became more frequent, and they now arrive on a daily basis. She supplied the contact information for a professional photographer after having already scheduled and paid for newborn shots. A fancy stroller appeared on our porch. Each present came with cards expressing her love and enthusiasm, providing evidence of a kind grandma being turned down by ungrateful parents. At 37 weeks, stress caused a false labor. As we rushed to the hospital, I became concerned that she was aware of our presence. The contractions subsided after monitoring, but the episode left us shaken. How could we handle real labor while remaining hyper-vigilant against her interference? Our marriage counselor, one of the few professionals who understood the circumstances, assisted us in developing a birth plan that included security precautions. We developed code words, backup plans, and contingencies for a variety of circumstances. What was supposed to be a conversation about pain management and birthing positions turned into a strategic defense planning session. Daniel's final intelligence report before my due date was the most worrisome yet. His mother had been visiting with other estranged grandparents to learn about their success and failures in seeking access. She'd studied case law and knew exactly what evidence courts considered compelling. Her preparation was rigorous, regarding our child as a trophy to be obtained through legal maneuvers. The nursery camera alerted us to movement. One night, my husband watched the feed and saw a package on the windowsill, which had been placed there without triggering our property's motion sensors. Inside was a hand-knitted blanket and a note. Made with love for my grandchild. Soon. The underlying menace in that one word, soon, kept me awake till morning. My due date went, and the waiting grew excruciating. Every twinge may indicate the onset of labor, putting our carefully laid preparations to the test. She appeared to be aware that we were close. Her social media messages became more frequent, discussing the anticipation of becoming a grandma, and eliciting sorrow from friends who were unaware of the real tale. My husband took full family leave, refusing to leave me alone as we neared the end. His determination moved me, but I could see the strain in his tired eyes and rigid shoulders. She'd managed to take even these precious last moments of pregnancy, transforming what should have been an exciting preparation into frightening vigilance. The 39th week delivered a surprise ally. A nurse at our preferred hospital recognized my mother-in-law's photograph from our security briefing. She had previously worked at another hospital where my mother-in-law had volunteered, and she had witnessed similar conduct in another family. Her validation felt like a lifeline. Finally, someone in authority recognized the trend. Labor began at dawn on a Tuesday, 3 days after my due date. As contractions became very intense, my husband carried out our plan. He exclusively called our most trusted allies, using the code phrases we had developed. We took a convoluted path to the hospital, looking for followers. Even while working, I couldn't quit monitoring for potential hazards. The hospital security had our photographs and processes ready. They stationed someone near the maternity ward entrance and gave stern instructions. We'd registered using aliases to keep our true names off public forums. Every safeguard we could think of was in place. But would it be sufficient? Between contractions, I observed my husband coordinating our defense. He examined doors, verified employee identities, and communicated with our security network. What should have been his time to emotionally support me was spent defending against his mother's entrance, which she had also taken from us, the normal birth experience we deserved. As transition approached and the agony worsened, my concentration shifted to the immediate job of safely bringing our kid into this world. The months of tension, fear, and hypervigilance melted in comparison to the primitive urgency of labor. But even at those intense moments, a part of me stayed vigilant, waiting for her to emerge. Our daughter was delivered at 11:47 p.m., perfectly healthy despite the stress of pregnancy. As I held her for the first time, tears streamed down my cheeks. I felt overwhelmed with love and intense protectiveness. She was here. She was ours, and I would do anything to protect her from the lady who wished to take her. My husband's expression as he greeted his daughter cut through months of strain. For a time, we were just new parents, amazed at the tiny life we had made. But reality struck swiftly as he checked his phone to ensure our security network was still operational. Even at our most wonderful time, she cast a shadow. The nurse who recognized my mother-in-law from another hospital went beyond her shift to safeguard us. She kept our names off public notice boards, personally checked every visitor, and formed a safety zone around our small family. Her generosity and understanding of our predicament meant more than she knew. Recovery was a jumble of meal regimens and security screenings. We opted not to release any announcements or images, maintaining a strict information blackout. Family members who had demonstrated trustworthiness were granted brief visits under strict guidelines. The ordinary thrill of welcoming a new baby became a secret operation. On the second night, hospital security stopped my mother-in-law in the parking garage. She'd been circling the hospital for hours, apparently sensing our presence despite our precautions. They escorted her off the property, warning her about trespassing, but we knew she'd only get more inventive with her approaches. The next morning presented a new difficulty. My mother-in-law had identified the room we were in and left a gift basket outside our door. The nurses discovered it during their rounds and brought it in, believing it was from family. Inside, there were pricey baby clothing and a card professing her affection for her grandchild. My husband quickly reported it to security, but the harm had been done. She knew where we were. We chose to leave the hospital early. The doctor cleared us after determining that both the baby and I were healthy enough. My spouse directed the automobile to a secondary door while security created a distraction at the main exit. We tucked our kid into her car seat and slipped away unnoticed, feeling like fugitives from our own home. At home, we discovered additional evidence of her existence: fresh flowers on our porch, a parcel from a high-end baby store. Our security cameras showed she arrived at 3 a.m., carefully avoiding the motion sensors she had obviously pre-mapped. The invasion into our space while we were at our most vulnerable felt deliberate and nasty. The timing of her parking garage arrival while they are still in the hospital appears to be very convenient. How did she find out they were there? Despite the fake names and security procedures, Daniel contacted with vital news. His mother had been meeting with a family court mediator, presenting herself as a caring grandmother attempting to establish contact with her grandchild. She had brought images of the nursery she had planned, receipts for all of the presents we had declined, and character references from her grandparents' support group. The mediator appeared sympathetic to her cause. My husband took swift action. He gathered all of our material into one complete dossier that included the pattern of harassment, security footage, threatening texts, and witness statements from hospital workers who had observed her behavior. We wanted to be prepared in case she pursued legal action, though we hoped to escape that nightmare. The first week at home with our daughter should have been fantastic. Instead, we lived in constant readiness. Every knock on the door sent my heart racing. When neighbors went over to congratulate her, I looked for clues that they had been speaking with her. The baby monitor became another security camera to obsess over. Natalie arrived with alarming intelligence. Her mother was spotted outside our pediatrician's office, presumably attempting to figure out where we'd be taking the baby for checkups. She'd also been begging family members for images of the infant, playing the victim of being cut off from her granddaughter's life. Some relatives began to crumble under her influence. We quickly changed pediatricians, heading to 3 towns away. The extra distance was exhausting for a newborn, but necessary. We enrolled using privacy protocols and explained the circumstance to the staff. They were understanding, but they clearly believed we were overreacting to family turmoil. If only they knew the whole scope. My mother-in-law has upped her psychological warfare. She created a social media page called Grandmother's Love Denied and posted poetry about missing her grandchild. She never mentioned our names, but family members knew exactly who she meant. Strangers expressed pity in the comments area, unaware of her actual nature. My husband reported the page, but she had been cautious not to post anything that violated the terms of service. Sleep deprivation makes things more difficult. Between feeding times and security concerns, neither of us had more than 2 hours at a time. My husband's paternity leave was running short, and I was frightened of being alone with the baby. Not because I couldn't handle parenting, but because I'd be open to whatever she had planned next. We engaged a security consultant with expertise in stalking situations. He inspected our procedures and offered enhancements, such as a panic button system and greater video coverage. The expense was too expensive, but my father-in-law secretly contributed, feeling bad about the monster he had inadvertently enabled for decades. During those difficult times, his encouragement was invaluable. The consultant also suggested that we change our routines frequently, never leaving at the same time, take various routes, and shop at random stores. Living like Wei was hard, but it was effective. We didn't see her for 3 weeks. I began to hope that she had given up. That hope was dashed when Daniel realized her new plan. She had been making the argument that we were isolating the baby from extended family, resulting in an unhealthy atmosphere. She'd documented every family gathering we'd missed, every invitation we'd turned down. In her story, we were the ones who harmed the child by denying her a relationship with caring relatives. My husband's job worsened due to his distractions and frequent absences. His mother had harmed several business relationships by calling his coworkers and expressing concern about his mental health since becoming a father. His manager approached him for a chat about work-life balance, apparently affected by what she had told them. We chose to go on the offensive. My spouse met with each family member individually and showed them our documents. Some were stunned by the evidence. Others remained convinced that we were overreacting. The DNA revelation exacerbated the family schism, forcing everyone to choose sides. During one of these visits, an aunt shared something important. My mother-in-law had already done this to my husband's father's sister decades earlier. She'd been kicked out of the family because my mother-in-law told everyone she was unstable. The aunt had relocated across the nation and stopped all contact. We followed her down and heard her story, which strangely resembled our own. We felt more assured after implementing this pattern of action. We were not crazy or overreacting. This was her predetermined technique of eradicating threats to her authority. The aunt submitted written testimony regarding her encounter, contributing to our increasing collection of evidence. My mother-in-law must have noticed the tide turning. Her techniques got increasingly desperate. She arrived at my husband's workplace with a lawyer, seeking to discuss grandmother rights. Security removed them, but not before numerous co-workers witnessed the incident. She had succeeded in making our private misery public. That night, we faced a difficult decision. We would relocate not only to another neighborhood, but out of state. My husband began job seeking in cities where we had no connections, and she was unable to follow. It meant quitting our support system, but remaining had become intolerable. Natalie helped us organize the relocation in secret. We utilized her address for job applications, conducted interviews via video chat, and made plans via encrypted communication. It was severe, but considering her resourcefulness, any precaution seemed justified. My husband got a job offer in a place 8 hours away. The position was really better than his present one, with understanding bosses who valued his candor about his family circumstances. We began to arrange our departure like a military operation. We couldn't utilize typical movers since they might be questioned or bribed. Instead, friends helped us pack in the middle of the night, filling a rental truck in shifts. We left furniture behind rather than risking an extended moving period. Our daughter slept through everything, blissfully ignorant of the disruption her presence had caused. The most difficult thing was leaving without saying goodbye to supportive family members. Any information could potentially reach my mother-in-law via the family grapevine. We left letters for Natalie to distribute when we departed, explaining our decision and promising to reconnect when we were settled and safe. On our last night, I strolled around our empty house, holding our daughter in my arms. This was not how I had envisaged beginning our family life. But when I glanced at her serene expression, I knew we were making the correct decision. She deserved to grow up in an environment devoid of manipulation and psychological warfare. We departed at 3 a.m. On a Wednesday, we took a roundabout route that added hours to our trip. My husband frequently checked the mirrors while I soothed our daughter in the back seat. Every automobile that trailed us for more than a few exits set our hearts racing. However, mile by mile, the strain began to subside. Daniel called while we were almost halfway to our destination. His mother had found we had left and was in complete breakdown mode. She had contacted the police, claiming that we had kidnapped her grandchild, but they had immediately rejected her because she couldn't prove any custodial rights. She had driven to our vacant house and stood in the driveway yelling, until neighbors phoned the cops. We arrived in our new city, fatigued, yet eager. The rental house was small, but it had enough security features. We chose it because of the gated yard and away from major traffic. As we brought our daughter across the threshold, I felt a sensation I hadn't had in months. Peace. The first several weeks were filled with pandemonium as everyone adjusted. New physicians, new routines, and new everything. But without the constant danger of her presence, we could finally appreciate our baby. I watched as my hubby gradually relaxed. The tightness in his shoulders dissipated as days went by without incident. We maintained stringent information security. There are no social media or public records updates. All is done through lawyers and encrypted methods. Natalie served as our communication hub for safe family members. We heard from her that my mother-in-law had hired a private investigator to find us. However, we had thoroughly concealed our tracks. 3 months into our new existence, I felt comfortable enough to join a local mothers group. Using only my first name, I started a new support network. The other mothers knew nothing about our past. The familiarity of seeing simply another family adjusting to parenting was soothing. My spouse excelled in his new position. He could now focus on his job without having to deal with continual crises. His confidence returned when he established new professional contacts free of his mother's poison. Watching him become the father he'd always wanted to be, free of her shadow, made me happy. Our daughter grew up in a loving and stable environment. She learned to smile, giggle, and crawl in a family where tension was not constant. Each milestone seemed like a success, not just for her growth, but also for our escape from the toxic environment that threatened to define her early life. Natalie returned after 6 months, conducting rigorous counter-surveillance to ensure she was not followed. She informed me that my mother-in-law's behavior had worsened to the point where even her most ardent supporters were withdrawing. Without us as targets, her instability became impossible to conceal. Several family members had contacted Natalie to apologize for not believing us sooner. The legal threats never resulted in actual court action. Without knowing where we were, she couldn't submit anything significant. Her lawyer evidently dropped her after discovering the severity of her harassment. Talk about playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. Hiring a security consultant for family turmoil is a higher level of problem solving. However, calling it family drama is like calling a hurricane mildly breezy weather. She had alienated the grandparent support groups by becoming too harsh for them. As our daughter's first birthday approached, I thought on her journey. We'd lost our house, our town, and the proximity of dear family members. But we had gained something extremely precious. Freedom from a lady who would have ruined our daughter's childhood via manipulation and control. We celebrated quietly, only the 3 of us. A tiny cake, a few presents, and the gift of calm normalcy. As I watched our kid crush icing into her hair, giggling with delight, I knew every sacrifice had been worthwhile. She would grow up with only good affection. We had never experienced the psychological warfare that had nearly destroyed us. My husband and I had risen stronger from the fire of mutual adversity. We'd learned to follow our instincts, safeguard our family, and prioritize peace over exposure to toxins. Our daughter would eventually learn her story, but for now, all she knew was protection and love. The future spread before us, full of possibilities, unhindered by her grandmother's shadow. We'd start new traditions, make new memories, and raise our daughter to be confident and secure. The cost of independence had been steep, but the tranquility we had discovered was invaluable. Our small family had won by choosing distance over devastation and obscurity over concern. In our new lives, we were just another young family in a peaceful neighborhood. No drama, no stalking, and no psychological warfare. Just the lovely, laborious routine of raising a child in peace. My mother kept trying to win my little sister's love until an accident she caused left my sister unable to walk forever. It started with a photo. My mom made my little sister write, "I love mommy more," across my dad's face. He beamed as his face sank. When I urged her to quit fighting for Sophie's affection, she rolled her eyes and claimed she had already chosen her favorite. "I'm just making sure she doesn't forget." I remained mute. That was 5 months ago. This morning she was dragging her fingernails along our garden fence, screaming Sophie's name as blood flowed from her hands. When my 7-year-old sister said she loved her father more, Mom was preparing dinner when Sophie rushed up to her and grabbed her skirt. Mommy, come, Daddy's wearing my Elsa costume, he looks so funny." Mom laughed, but said she was too busy to go look. And Sophie humorously responded, "Ooh, I'm Mommy, I cook, I'm too bored to have fun." She then giggled. "That's why I love Daddy more." She dashed back to play. Mom shrugged it off, but I could tell from her eyes that the comment pained her. Mom helped erect the fort the next day after dinner. She crawled through the blanket tunnels with Sophie. They even made silly voices for the plush animals. When Sophie requested for ice cream after dinner, Mom immediately said yes. Dad raised an eyebrow, but Mom simply winked at him. Then continued to make Sophie giggle by putting ice cream on Dad's nose and licking it off. A few days later, I saw Mom and Sophie roll down the slope in our backyard. Mom's pricey birthday sundress was completely ruined by grass stains and muck. Dad looked frightened, but Mom simply shrugged. Memories matter more than dresses. We all thought it was very cute. Until then, Mom's behaviors had become more than just entertaining. Dad returned home from work with a new puzzle for him and Sophie to complete. When Mom saw it, she quickly stated that she and Sophie were going to have ice cream. "Just us girls tonight." Dad's face dropped, but he did not dispute. Worse, it became a pattern. Every night, Mom would plan a unique activity for herself and Sophie that excluded Dad entirely. I recall one particular Saturday during family drawing time the next day. Mom repeatedly whispered to Sophie. I watched her push Sophie to depict Dad with a pout and write, "I love Mommy more," at the top. When Dad viewed the photo, his shoulders dropped. Mom immediately smiled as if she had won something. A few days later, Mom grabbed finger paint and began painting straight on our living room walls with Sophie. When Dad tried to stop them, Mom grabbed Sophie's hand and they fled outside, chuckling. Dad and I spent 3 hours cleaning the walls clean. 2 days later, I was searching for Christmas decorations in the attic. I caught Mom lifting Sophie through the gap and onto the roof. The roof lacked safety railings and sloped sharply. I screamed for her to stop and she rolled her eyes. "We're just having fun. You're as boring as your father." The car incident occurred on a Tuesday. Dad and I left Sophie and Mom in the van while we went to the shop for munchies. But when we got out, what we saw made our mouths drop. Sophie was driving Mom's SUV. Mom was in the passenger seat urging, "Press harder on the pedal, sweetie." Sophie pressed too hard and smashed into a parked car. The owner rushed out a few minutes later. Dad accepted responsibility right away and handed over his insurance information, as well as $500 in cash. Mom was praising Sophie how fantastic she did. That night I went to check on Sophie. She was cuddled up on her princess bed, and when I sat down, she whispered, "Mommy is starting to scare me." Dad and I staged an intervention the following morning. We took Mom down and discussed how she frightened Sophie with her unsafe behavior. Mom's face turned red. "You're ganging up on the fun parent. Sophie loves me more now." She said so. We tried to reason with her, but she stormed away. The next day, Dad realized that Mom had emptied their entire savings account. $4,000 gone. He found the receipt. She had purchased a large commercial-grade bouncy castle for her lawn. "Sophie will love this," she remarked when confronted. A few days later, I returned home from school to discover Sophie in the backyard, carrying Dad's axe. She had blood trickling down her leg from a gash. Mom stood nearby, clapping. "Come on, sweetie. This is fun. Don't mind the cut. Tough girls don't cry." Sophie looked like she was about to sob. I took the axe and Dad carried Sophie inside to bandage her leg. Mom followed us, shouting at us for wrecking everything. That night we got down with Mom and informed her quite bluntly. Either she stops or Dad and I leave. She scoffed at first, but as she understood we were serious, she agreed to back down. Well, that lasted 2 days. That was when we received a direct call from Mom. She was sobbing so hard we couldn't understand her. I messed up real bad. Come to the hospital now." We exceeded every speed limit on our way to the ER and discovered Mom in the waiting room. Her clothing were wet, and she was shaking. She explained what happened with uncontrollable sobbing. She had taken Sophie to the old quarry for some swimming fun. She encouraged Sophie to jump into the ocean from higher and higher rocks. She told us Sophie was afraid after jumping from 20 feet and injuring her ankle. She told her mother that she did not want to jump anymore. Mom cried, stating she had a dreadful gut feeling and should have stopped. But she really wanted to be a fun mom. She virtually coerced Sophie into jumping from the 30-foot cliff. The rock was salty and slippery. Sophie misplaced her leg while making the leap. She hit the shallow water incorrectly. Mom stated that there was a massive crack, and Sophie was not waking up. She was alive when she carried her inside. However, doctors refused to make any promises. We waited at the ER for 12 hours. When the doctor finally appeared, they broke the news. Sophie's spinal cord was almost completely severed at L2. She might never walk again. It was the first time I'd ever seen Dad cry. They let us see Sophie briefly after another hour. She was medicated but conscious. When she noticed us, her gaze turned to Mom. "You scare me, Mommy. Get away from me." The hospital security guard approached us and requested Mom to go outside. She began to resist, but Dad grabbed her arm firmly and led her down the hallway. I remained with Sophie, clutching her small hand as equipment beeped around us. Her gaze kept darting to the door, ensuring that Mom would not return. Through the window, I saw Dad's expression shift from one of grief to one of anger. His mouth clenched as Mom gestured madly, apparently attempting to explain herself. She kept pointing back to Sophie's room. However, every time she tried to return, Dad blocked her route. The doctor returned with a clipboard and began detailing Sophie's condition to me. I was the only family member present. He gave me x-rays on a tablet, indicating the injured vertebrae. The words partial paralysis and significant rehabilitation slipped by me. All I could see was Sophie's little figure in that big hospital bed. Dad returned alone 20 minutes later. His eyes were crimson, but his face was determined. He kissed Sophie's forehead and said something I couldn't understand. Then he turned to me and beckoned for us to enter the hallway. Outside Sophie's room, Dad took out his phone and began making calls. First, he called his mother, my grandma, and asked her to come right away. Then he contacted his brother, a contractor who lived 2 hours away. Every talk was brief and urgent. Between calls he kept looking back to Sophie's room. Mom arrived at the end of the hall, attempting to approach again. I heard raised words as a nurse intercepted her. Dad did not even look up from his phone. He was scrolling through something, and his face became darker with each swipe. Later that evening, Grandma arrived carrying an overnight bag. She hugged us both tightly and headed straight to Sophie's bedside. Sophie's features softened somewhat as she spotted her. Grandma had always been her safe haven, reading her goodnight stories and baking her favorite cookies. Dad called me away while Grandma was sitting with Sophie. He showed me his phone's screen. Mom had previously written about the horrific tragedy on social media, using crying emojis and requesting prayers. The responses were filled with sympathy and support. Nobody knew exactly what had transpired. Sophie awoke the next morning feeling more aware. Physical therapists arrived to evaluate her. They moved her legs lightly to test for sensation. Sophie winced, but felt nothing below her knees. The therapist took notes on her record as she explained the long path ahead. Mom attempted to visit again during the shift change. She had brought a large teddy bear and balloons. The staff had evidently been told not to let her in without Dad's approval. She left the gifts at the nurse's station, and I noticed her crying in the elevator as the doors closed. Dad's brother Lucas came that afternoon. The two men crowded in the corner of the waiting room, conversing quietly. Lucas continued to shake his head and run his hands through his hair. I overheard parts of their chat about emergency custody and papers. Sophie underwent her first operation 2 days later to fix her spine. We waited in the surgery waiting room. Dad paced back and forth while Grandma knitted to keep her hands occupied. Mom arrived midway through, but hospital security led her to a separate waiting room after Dad spoke with them. The procedure went smoothly, but the surgeon's update was grim. Sophie would need several months of physical rehabilitation. She might recover some function, but walking normally seemed improbable. Dad's fist tightened so firmly that his knuckles became white. Dad made more phone calls that night when Sophie was sleeping. This time he contacted his bank, insurance company and work regarding family medical leave. He was building something, prepping for something, but I wasn't sure what. Mom sent me dozens of text messages, images of Sophie as a baby, videos of them playing together, and lengthy essays about how sorry she was. I did not respond. Every time my phone buzzed, I remembered Sophie's horrified expression as she asked her mother to leave. On the 4th day, the social worker paid a visit. She interviewed each of us separately, asking detailed questions about Sophie's home life and the circumstances that led up to her injuries. The pattern here demonstrates how Mom's demand for recognition absolutely outweighs her parenting judgment. Consider how she frames every interaction as a competition with Dad, rather than focusing on Sophie's genuine needs or safety. Dad had prepared a packet with printed screenshots of Mom's social media posts, bank statements indicating depleted savings, and images of Sophie with the axe wound. Sophie began physical therapy while still in the hospital. The therapist assisted her with simple exercises aimed at maintaining muscular tone in her paralyzed legs. Sophie tried so hard, her face wrinkled in concentration, but her legs wouldn't follow her directions. Mom snuck in during a shift change. I discovered her standing over Sophie's bed, stroking her hair and muttering apologies. Sophie's monitor began beeping faster and her heart rate spiked. She forced her eyes tight, pretending to sleep. I punched the call button and informed the nurse that Mom was not meant to be there. Mom turned against me, her face twisted with rage. She accused me of poisoning Sophie against her, siding with Dad, and destroying their particular link. Security arrived before she could say anything else. Dad moved quickly after that. He met with a family lawyer advised by Lucas and gathered all of the data we'd gathered, including images of the finger paint on the walls, the bill for the bouncy castle, medical papers from Sophie's axe wound, and witness statements from neighbors who had seen Mom put Sophie on the roof. The house felt empty without Sophie's laughter. Dad and I took turns staying at the hospital, ensuring that someone was constantly with her. We packed her favorite books, teddy animals, and anything else that might help make the sterile room feel more like home. Mom's behavior worsened. She showed up at my school, hoping to persuade me to speak with Dad on her behalf. She contacted Dad's workplace repeatedly until his boss intervened. She even called Sophie's teacher, telling him stories about how her father was keeping her away from her daughter. One evening when Dad was meeting with the lawyer, I sat with Sophie and ate dinner. She could only take a few bites of hospital food. She asked me quietly if she would ever walk again. I did not know how to respond. Grandma moved in briefly to assist. She cooked meals, cleaned laundry, and ensured that I arrived at school on time. She also served as a guard at the hospital, turning away Mom when she attempted to visit during Dad's shifts. The medical expenses began arriving. Even with insurance, the expenses were enormous. Dad spent several hours on the phone with billing departments, insurance companies, and the hospital's financial aid office. The stress was evident in the fresh creases on his face. Sophie experienced both good and bad days. Sometimes she pushed hard in physical therapy, determined to regain sensation in her legs. Other times she just wailed, wondering why Mommy had her leap off the cliff. The therapist stated that the emotional damage may take longer to heal than the physical ailments. Mother hired her own lawyer. The house received papers claiming visiting rights. Dad crumpled them up and dumped them in the trash before retrieving and smoothing them out, knowing he'd need them for paperwork. Lucas assisted Dad with the installation of security cameras throughout the home. They installed new locks on all of the doors and windows. Dad didn't say it out, but we all knew he was concerned about what Mom would do next. Sophie's 7th week in the hospital resulted in a tiny breakthrough. Throughout therapy, she had tingling in her left foot. The therapist told us not to set our expectations too high, but Sophie smiled for the first time since the accident. Mom's social media messages became increasingly unpredictable. She published old images of herself and Sophie, with remarks about being separated from her baby. She mentioned Dad's business, my school, and even the hospital. Dad documented everything and added it to his growing file. The night before Sophie's discharge, we held a family meeting in her room. Dad said that she would be returning home, but everything will be altered. We had transformed the dining room into a bedroom because she could not climb stairs. A wheelchair ramp was being constructed. Physical therapists would visit the house 3 times a week. Sophie listened carefully before asking if Mommy would be there. Dad knelt beside her bed and pledged to keep her safe. She nodded, entirely trusting him, but I saw terror in her eyes. As we prepared to take Sophie home, I reflected on how much had changed in just 2 months. Our family was fractured, possibly beyond repair, but Sophie was still alive, which was all that counted. The real war has barely begun. The wheelchair ramp installation crew arrived at dawn. I looked out the window as they measured and cut lumber, the roar of power tools drowning out the morning birds. Dad oversaw every aspect, measuring angles and testing the surface. Sophie sat in her improvised wheelchair on the porch, her hands holding the armrests. Mom's automobile pulled up across the street. She sat there for 20 minutes, simply watching. Dad noticed but continued working with the crew. When Mom eventually got out and approached, Dad stopped her on the walkway. Their conversation lasted less than a minute before Mom stormed back into her car and drove away. Sophie's first night home was tough. The hospital bed we had leased barely fit into the renovated dining room. She awoke crying 3 times, disoriented and asking for assistance. Every time, Dad or I raced to her side. Grandma slept on the couch nearby, eager to help. The next morning, we had our first home physical therapy session. Olivia, a patient woman, spent an hour working with Sophie. She demonstrated exercises to assist us maintain muscular tone and avoid problems. Sophie fought with each movement, sweat dripping on her forehead. Mom attempted another visit that afternoon. This time, she brought Sophie's favorite aunt, evidently thinking that familial pressure would allow her access. Dad stood hard by the door. Leanne appeared uneasy, caught between family members. After they went, Dad discovered a gift bag on the porch with expensive toys and a note begging for forgiveness. I hesitantly returned to school, apprehensive about abandoning Sophie. My teachers had been apprised of the issue and were providing assignment extensions. During lunch, I spotted Mom's car in the guest parking area. The principal then informed me she attempted to sign me out early, citing a family emergency. Sophie's progression remained modest. The tingle in her left foot fluctuated unpredictably. Sometimes she could wiggle her toes slightly. Other days produced no sensation at all. The physical therapist cautioned us that spinal injuries are unpredictable. Recovery is non-linear. Dad found that Mom had been calling Sophie's doctors, pretending to be his assistant, to obtain medical updates. The hospital tightened its information processes. Following that, only fathers could receive updates, and only in person with proper identification. Lucas spent the weekends assisting his father with modifying the house to accommodate Sophie's needs. They added grab bars to the restroom, expanded entrances and made smooth transitions between rooms. Sophie watched from her wheelchair, occasionally pointing out areas where she required extra support. Mom's tactics evolved. She began sending gifts via delivery services, including cuddly animals, novels, and art equipment. Each parcel had messages expressing her love and minimizing the incident. Dad photographed everything before storing everything in the garage, creating a documentation file. The medical expenditures continued to grow. Even with payment arrangements, the financial hardship was evident. Dad sold his motorcycle and worked more shifts whenever possible. Grandmother contributed from her pension. We made sacrifices together to assist Sophie's rehabilitation. Sophie's emotional condition changed dramatically. Some days, she resembled her former self, laughing at cartoons and playing with toys. Other days, she didn't say anything, staring at her unmoving legs with hollow eyes. The trauma counselor came twice a week and used play therapy to help her cope. Mom showed up for one of Sophie's physical therapy sessions. She had somehow figured out the timetable and waited till Dad went out to take a work call. Olivia abruptly halted the session and wheeled Sophie to her bedroom while I blocked Mom's route. Her anguished pleas rang throughout the house until her father reappeared and let her out. The security cameras proved their worth repeatedly. They caught Mom trying to enter through the back gate at night, testing windows and even attempting to befriend our elderly neighbor in order to gain access to the house. Dad collected the footage and added it to his ever-growing archive. Sophie's scholastic circumstance necessitated cautious planning. She couldn't go back to her normal classroom yet. The district supplied a home tutor 3 days per week. Sophie struggled with the adjustment, missing her pals and her usual routine. We scheduled video conferences with students in an attempt to retain some normalcy. Mom's lawyer wrote more hostile letters requesting access. They questioned Dad's decisions, suggested mistreatment, and threatened legal action. Dad's lawyer answered by providing evidence of Mom's harmful behavior and Sophie's explicit fear of her mother. One morning, I discovered that Mom had slipped dozens of printed photos under our door from before the accident, depicting joyful moments between her and Sophie. The manipulation was evident, yet it ached to witness those memories weaponized. Sophie reached a significant milestone in week 10. She stood with support for 30 seconds. The physical therapist used parallel bars to help her get out of her wheelchair. Her legs shook furiously, but supported her weight. We all sobbed, including Olivia. Mom's social media campaign escalated. She started a blog chronicling her unfair separation from Sophie, portraying herself as a victim of her father's domineering actions. Friends and distant relatives began phoning after only hearing Mom's story. Dad declined to speak publicly, instead focusing on Sophie's care. The financial burden compelled severe judgments. Dad pondered selling the house in favor of something smaller and more accessible to Sophie. Lucas offered to buy Dad's truck and loan it back to him, which moved Dad to tears. Mom is playing lawyer ping pong, while Sophie is learning to walk again. Talk about priorities becoming as twisted as a pretzel in a blender. The security cameras recording her window shopping at midnight like a bargain burglar demonstrate her problem-solving abilities. We were running out of resources. Sophie's improvement has plateaued, which is frustrating. The initial gains ceased, leaving her with little sensation and little functional movement below the knees. The doctors altered their expectations, referring to permanent modifications rather than full healing. Mom tried to ambush us during a medical checkup. She approached the parking garage as her father transported Sophie from the car to a wheelchair. Sophie began hyperventilating, and her entire body shook. Security intervened while I consoled Sophie, but the harm had been done. She refused to leave the house for several days following. Grandma's health deteriorated as a result of her stress. She acquired high blood pressure and required her own medical appointments. The role reversal was difficult. She had come to assist us, but she now needed care for herself. Dad recruited a part-time assistant, which was another expenditure we couldn't afford. Sophie's birthday approached, her first after the catastrophe. She requested a quiet celebration with only her family. My heart ached as she said, "No, Mommy." We arranged a low-key celebration with her favorite cake and a few homemade gifts. Mom discovered the birthday idea on social media. A cousin had casually mentioned it. She arrived with a huge present and demanded entrance. Dad forcefully blocked the door as she yelled accusations. Sophie heard everything from her room and sobbed into her pillow. The event caused Dad to file for a restraining order. The lawyer stated, "We had enough documentation, but the process would take time." Meanwhile, Mom's harassment persisted through every possible channel. Sophie began experiencing nightmares about water. She would wake up gasping, as if she were drowning. The trauma counselor increased their appointments, but progress was gradual. Sophie refused to take baths, instead allowing for brief showers while grasping safety bars. Mom enlisted the help of flying monkeys, as well as friends and family members who believed her story. They called frequently, left messages, and even arrived at our door. Each contact depleted our energy and time, which we required for Sophie's care. Lucas found that Mom was spreading accusations about Dad at work, accusing him of being harsh and domineering. Dad's supervisor, fortunately, recognized the reality and supported him. However, co-workers' murmurs and stares added an additional degree of tension. Sophie's incremental advances became our lifeline. She learned how to shift herself from bed to wheelchair with little aid. She could take a shower while sitting down, using grasp bars. Each small independence win felt tremendous. Mom's attempts became increasingly imaginative and scary. She hired a private detective to photograph our regular activities. She asked Sophie's old babysitter to check on everything. She even phoned my school counselor to express her concerns about my home life. The breaking point occurred during Sophie's swim treatment session. It was her first time near water since the accident, in a carefully supervised therapy setting. Sophie was making progress, floating with help, when Mom emerged through the pool's glass observation window. Sophie noticed her and panicked, breathing water and choking. Sophie was hysterical and fought everybody who tried to touch her, so the therapist had to remove her out right away. Sophie vomited from fright at the end of the session and refused to continue with therapy. Dad eventually snapped. He addressed Mom in the parking lot as I remained with Sophie. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see Dad's controlled rage, Mom's theatrical motions, and finally her speeding away. Dad returned, shaking with wrath. That night we had an emergency family meeting. Dad, Grandma, Lucas and I spoke about alternatives as Sophie slept. The situation was untenable. Mom's rising behavior was impeding Sophie's improvement. We needed a permanent answer. Lucas offered going out of state and starting over somewhere Mom couldn't follow. Grandma was concerned about Sophie's medical team and established care. Dad investigated legal possibilities in other jurisdictions. I just wanted Sophie to feel safer again. Sophie must have overheard as she wheeled herself out. Tears flowed. She begged us not to force her to leave her doctors and her room, which were the only sources of stability she had. We pledged to find another way. Dad spent the following few days on the phone with attorneys, social workers, and advocacy organizations. The restraining order papers progressed slowly. Mom's attorney fought every step, requesting psychological assessments and supervised visitation. Mom's behavior indicated that she was unraveling. Her social media messages become increasingly nonsensical. She shared previous footage of Sophie walking, running, jumping, and all the stuff she had stolen from her. The wickedness was astounding. One afternoon, while Dad was in a legal meeting and Grandmother was napping, I heard a commotion in the backyard. Through the glass, I noticed Mom attempting to demolish a portion of our new fence. She was crying and tearing at the planks with her bare hands. I contacted Dad right away and kept Sophie distracted in her room. Mom's hands had bled on the fence by the time Dad came with Lucas. They discovered her prostrate in the yard, sobbing about wanting to see her baby. The police arrived this time. Mom was brought for a mental evaluation. Dad battled with contradictory emotions. Anger over what she'd done to Sophie, but also grief at her apparent mental decline. We could all feel how terrible everything had gone. Sophie detected a difference in the house that evening. She wondered whether Mama was unwell, and that was why she did such horrible things. We attempted to describe mental health in ways that a 7-year-old might comprehend while validating her anxiety and rage. The psychiatric hold lasted for 72 hours. During that time, we had an experience that we almost forgot about. Peace. Sophie relaxed slightly, participated more in therapy, and even smiled during a video conversation with her schoolmates. When Mom was released, she was given medication and required therapy. Her lawyer called her father about a suggested deal. Mom would remain away if Dad lifted the restraining order. Dad declined, understanding that we required legal protection. Sophie's rehabilitation progressed positively during her mother's absence. She regained sensation in her left foot and could now move her toes deliberately. The physical therapist was cautiously optimistic about the possibility of partial mobility through intense therapy. We used the quiet moment to build better procedures. Sophie began attending online school sessions and maintained regular contact with her teacher and classmates. She joined a virtual support group for kids with spinal injuries. She was slowly creating a new normal. Mom's return to pestering was quick, but different. The drug appeared to reduce her intensity but not her determination. She wrote to Sophie through her lawyer, proposing various concessions, monitored visits, phone calls, and even just letters. Dad spoke with Sophie's trauma counselor about the proposals. The counselor was straightforward. Sophie was not prepared for any contact. The terror was still too raw. The trauma is too recent. Forcing interaction could result in major setbacks. We focused on minor successes. Sophie learned how to prepare basic meals from her wheelchair. She began drawing again, but her pictures were noticeably darker than before. She even smiled at Dad's horrible jokes on occasion. The restraining order hearing approaches. Dad methodically organized evidence and witness statements. Lucas took off work to testify. Even some neighbors offered to talk about what they had witnessed. Mom got a new lawyer, one renowned for aggressive tactics. They filed counter motions, wanted Sophie's medical records, and questioned Dad's parenting abilities. Legal maneuvering was tiresome. Sophie's 8th birthday was 6 months away, but she was already concerned about it. She had me pledged to help Dad keep Mommy away. It crushed my heart to see a 7-year-old contemplating defense measures for her own birthday. Physical treatment produced incremental development. Sophie could stand for 2 minutes with support. She felt sensation in both feet, but her motor control remained limited. Each session tested her limits, leaving her fatigued but determined. Mom's mother, our other grandmother, eventually responded. She had only heard her mother's version of events, and was surprised to learn the truth. She offered to help in any way she could, even if it meant testifying about her daughter's actions. The familial fractures widened. Relatives took sides based on insufficient information. Holiday planning became a minefield. Sophie inquired as to why certain cousins had stopped visiting. Another loss in her transformed world. Dad's employer proposed permanent remote employment to assist with Sophie's care. Flexibility was essential for appointments and therapy sessions. His coworkers planned dinner deliveries and gift vouchers, which were little but meaningful gestures. Sophie developed coping techniques, some of which were helpful, while others were worrisome. She insisted on checking the door locks repeatedly. She kept a whistle beside her bed. She had me vow that I would never leave her alone with Mommy, despite our assurances that this would not happen. The restraining order hearing was postponed when Mom's lawyer requested additional preparation time. The delay irritated everyone, but our lawyer assured us that it would eventually help our case. More time meant more evidence of Mom's ongoing harassment. Sophie's growth inspired everyone. She learned how to manage curbs with her wheelchair. She could shower alone using safety equipment. She even discussed returning to school part-time next year. Mom's attempts to push our boundaries became more inventive. She sent packages to Sophie's friends' homes, hoping they would deliver them. She volunteered at community activities, knowing that we might go. She was everywhere and nowhere, posing a perpetual menace. The day before the rescheduled hearing, Mom made her most daring move yet. She arrived with a moving truck and claimed to be taking her items from the residence. Dad phoned the police and I kept Sophie calm in her room. Mom is employing a moving truck as if it were a custody Uber. I am quite sure that is not how joint property works, but that is fine. The moment right before court is ideal for exacerbating your own case. The officers assessed the situation and barred Mom from entering. She screamed for her rights, her property, and her kid. Sophie heard everything. Despite our attempts, the trauma counselor had to conduct an emergency session that night. As we prepared for the hearing, I considered our new reality. Sophie was stronger than a 7-year-old should have been. Dad had aged years and months. Grandma's health remained frail. We were surviving, but it came at a high cost. The hearing would determine our immediate situation, but the long term was undetermined. Sophie might never walk normally again. Mom's mental health appeared to be deteriorating. Our family was permanently affected by one person's desperate need to be the fun parent. But we had each other. We achieved minor successes and gained optimism. Sophie was alive, becoming stronger, and learning to navigate her new reality. The struggle hadn't ended. But we were still battling. The hearing morning began with unforeseen issues. Mom's new lawyer filed an emergency motion, claiming that Dad had hidden assets. The court adjourned hearings to analyze financial papers. Dad's hands shook as he collected bank statements, tax returns, and receipts for every penny spent on Sophie's care. During the delay, Mom attempted to reach Sophie's physical therapist. She called the rehabilitation center claiming to update insurance information before breaking down in tears about missing her baby. Olivia politely declined to relay messages, but she did notify us about the incident. Sophie's anxiousness increased with the court postponement. She scarcely slept, continually checking to make sure her bedroom door was shut. At 3 a.m., I caught her practicing wheelchair maneuvers and planning escape routes in case Mom got inside. The trauma counselor implemented emergency sessions. 2 days before the rescheduled hearing, Lucas learned that Mom had been photographing our house from various perspectives. The neighbor's security camera saw her estimating the distance from the street to Sophie's window. Dad quickly moved Sophie's bed away from the windows and fitted blackout curtains. The financial examination found that Mom had opened credit cards in Dad's name and maxed out on cash advances. We were unaware that we had $23,000 in debt. Dad's lawyer hurried to add fraud documentation to our case, while Dad spent hours on the phone with credit card companies. Sophie's physical treatment deteriorated. She was always watching the door, so she couldn't concentrate on her workouts. Her progress was reversed. The 2-minute standing record fell to 30 seconds. Olivia recommended suspending sessions until the legal matter was resolved, but Sophie insisted on continuing. Mom's mother paid an unexpected visit and delivered disturbing news. She discovered journals in her mother's apartment that detailed complex preparations to rescue Sophie. The submissions included researched wheelchair-accessible routes to the Canadian border, as well as lists of drugs that might be used to sedate children. Grandma handed everything up to Dad's lawyer. We all stayed awake the night before the hearing. Sophie experienced panic attacks every several hours. Dad paced the home, checking the locks and cameras. I sat in Sophie's doorway, observing her restless slumber. Grandma brewed many glasses of tea. Nobody drank. The court day began with Mom appearing in a wheelchair, claiming stress-induced paralysis. Her lawyer contended that she needed accommodation and understanding, not restriction. The judge requested medical proof. Mom unexpectedly rose up when the bailiff proposed calling the ambulance. Dad delivered our evidence systematically. Security footage, medical data, financial fraud documentation, and witness testimony. The judge's countenance darkened as the pattern revealed. Mom's lawyer tried to interrupt several times but was shut down. Sophie delivered her testimony via video hookup from a secure room. She talked openly about her dread, nightmares, and the accident. When asked if she wanted to see her mother, Sophie shuddered and shook her head. The judge observed her obvious anxiety. Mom's testimony unraveled swiftly. She contradicted herself regarding the quarry event, saying the roof access was secure and that the axe wound was overstated. When Sophie was shown images of her injuries, she blamed her father for not providing adequate supervision. Her lawyer winced visibly. The judge ordered a recess following Mom's outburst about being the victim. During the break, Mom cornered me in the hallway restroom. She gripped my shoulders and begged me to tell the judge that Sophie needed her mother. I yelled, and security removed her. Lucas testified about her mother's attempts to gain entrance to the residence, revealing footage from cameras she was unaware of. The judge observed Mom testing windows at 2 a.m., attempting to pick locks and even offering to bribe the mailman for a key. Each video bolstered our case. Olivia presented expert testimony regarding Sophie's regression during Mom's contact attempts. She added that Sophie's physical improvement was closely tied to her sense of safety. The medical evidence was apparent. Mom's presence actively hampered Sophie's recuperation. Mom's final witness, a friend who had only heard her account, faltered under cross-examination. She revealed that she had never seen Mom with Sophie after the accident and had only heard her stories. She left the stand, visibly distressed, understanding she had been duped. The judge's ruling arrived quickly. Sophie received a permanent restraining order and was not allowed to contact anyone until she reached 18. Mom screamed for her rights, love, and baby. As she approached her father, the bailiffs pushed in closer. Her lawyer physically held her back. Mom made a final attempt outside the courthouse. She broke free from her lawyer and dashed to Dad's car, where Sophie waited. I pushed myself between them as Dad started the engine. Mom stomped on my back, yelling Sophie's name, till cops arrived. Sophie's soft cries broke the silence on the way home. She had heard everything via the car's windows. Dad reached back to clasp her hand, and I caressed her shoulders. Grandma waited on the porch, her face filled with questions that we would address later. That night, Sophie slept soundly for the first time in months. No checking locks, no nightmares, and no terror. Dad sat outside her door anyway, eventually allowing himself to cry. The war was won, but the cost was enormous. Mom's harassment did not stop immediately. She sent letters to various relatives, set up bogus social media sites, and even hired a plane to fly a banner above our house. Every violation was noted and reported. Her personal lawyer eventually dropped her as a client. Sophie's rehabilitation progressed faster without the continual fear. She stood for 5 minutes inside a week. Her toes responded regularly. Olivia sobbed delighted tears when Sophie took an assisted step with parallel bars. Hope crept back into our lives. The financial fallout took several months to address. Dad fought every false charge while handling Sophie's medical bills. Lucas arranged a fundraiser to help meet therapy expenses. The community's support astonished us. People who had witnessed Mom's slide wanted to help. Sophie's emotional mending went slowly. She was still scared by unexpected noises and insisted on seeing who was at the door before opening it. But she smiled more, laughed at movies, and even inquired about going back to school for art class. 6 months after the hearing, Mom was arrested for breaking the restraining order. She had been captured on school grounds during Sophie's virtual graduation ceremony. Her efforts were finally thwarted when she faced criminal accusations. Prison was her new reality. Sophie learned to walk with forearm crutches, defying the initial prediction. Each step required immense effort, but she persevered. We all sobbed when she walked unassisted across her bedroom. She wouldn't sprint or jump again, but she could walk. Dad gradually improved our financial stability. He accepted a promotion that required additional hours but allowed remote work. The balance was not perfect, but Sophie was never without attention or support. We learned how to function as a smaller, stronger family unit. Sophie's 9th birthday arrived peacefully. She requested a poolside party. She is confronting her phobia of water head-on. With her crutches removed, she floated with companions, laughing. The delight on her face wiped away months of anguish. She was healing. Truly healing. Mom's letters from prison remained unanswered. Sophie made her own decision, asking Dad to return them unopened. She focused on moving forward rather than lingering on the past. Her strength astounded everyone who knew our story. House alterations become permanent fixtures. What began as emergency modifications turned into Sophie's unique environment. She decorated her room with artwork she did while recovering. Each item represents her journey from darkness to hope. Sophie returned to school part-time, using a wheelchair and crutches. Her classmates greeted her enthusiastically. She joined both the art club and the student newspaper, discovering new methods to express herself. Normal seemed odd, but possible. Sophie entered an adaptive sports event 2 years after her accident. I saw her race in her wheelchair, determination imprinted on her face. I saw the fighter she had become. She did not win, but her smile as she crossed the finish line was triumphant. Dad fell in love again with a physical therapist from the hospital. She recognized our family's scars and offered compassion and warmth. Sophie approved after considerable consideration, even asking if she may attend the wedding. Healing occurred in unexpected ways. Mom's discharge day came finally, but we were prepared. Legal protections remained in place. Sophie, aged 12, felt secure in her identity despite the experience. She was aware that her mother might try to return, but she also understood that we would protect her. Our family appeared different than before. Smaller, scarred, but unbreakable. Sophie walked on crutches but stood tall. Dad had tension lines but grinned freely. Grandma walked slowly, but she remained our base. I grew up faster than expected, but I found meaning in defending my sister. Mom's urgent need to be the fun parent was costed in Sophie's steps, Dad's gray hair, and Grandma's medicine bottles. Nonetheless, we survived. More than that, we learned to thrive in our new surroundings. Sophie's laughter resumed. Different, yet genuine. That triumph was most important. My sister framed me as a thief and turned our family against me. Now they're begging for forgiveness while facing IRS investigations. My sister teasingly said, "Don't show your face at Dad's 50th. You bring shame," after I had paid $9,700 in expenditures. She hissed, "You earn $18 an hour and believe you are important?" I grinned and canceled the venue, catering, decor, and all credit lines. "No face, no party," I said. I received 101 missed calls from nearly every guest in a few hours. "Don't you dare show your face at Dad's 50th, Michael. Vanessa's voice sliced like a razor into my quiet. When I picked up, she didn't even wait for me to greet her. It didn't surprise me. Most of our chats these days, if you could call them conversations at all, went like this. She went on to say, "You bring shame to this family," in a disgusted tone. "You make $18 an hour and you actually think you deserve to be there? Pathetic." My jaw tensed, but I remained silent. Words are weapons in my family, and Vanessa was always armed to the teeth, as I discovered long ago. "Michael," she continued, "you don't belong at the country club. You'll embarrass Dad. All his friends will be there. People with real careers, real money. Not some low-level IT nobody who lives paycheck to paycheck." For a minute, I closed my eyes, allowing her words to envelop me like they always had. The subtle embarrassment, the old hurt, and the reminder that my efforts were never sufficient. However, something was different this time. I finally said, "Vanessa," in a firm voice. "I paid for this entire party. The venue, the catering, the decorations. Almost 10 grand out of my own pocket." She chuckled. To be honest, I laughed. I had heard that condescending, mocking chuckle since we were young. "Oh please, you should be grateful we even let you pay," she grumbled. "You think that buys you a seat at the table? No, Michael. You're the help. That's all you've ever been. No face, no party." Her words kept repeating in my mind. They're all slapping each other. I had already experienced this kind of treatment. I had been the one keeping everything together for years, picking up the pieces, paying the bills, and making the sacrifices. And each time I kept telling myself that perhaps, just possibly, this would be the day that they would finally accept me as a member of the family. However, they never did. I forced myself to remain calm as I gently breathed. Something was shattering inside though. Or perhaps, at last, it was being reconstructed. I grinned because the choice had been made, not because I thought it was humorous. "No face, no party," I said quietly again. "Got it." I hung up after saying that. What none of them knew, and what Vanessa didn't know, was that I wasn't going to accept it this time. I had finished their game this time. They were going to find out just how much power I actually have this time. I believed I was helping for years. I see now that I was feeding a monster. It began modestly, it always does. The golden kid had always been Vanessa. The ideal daughter. The bright spot. And me? I was just Michael. The one in charge. The person who wired the money, cleaned up the mess, and never inquired. However, Vanessa. She was skilled at playing everyone. Following her third failed relationship and another job that she somehow lost unfairly, she experienced financial difficulties once more last year. She sobbed as she called and said she was unable to pay her credit cards. "Michael, you know I'd never ask if it wasn't serious. I'm trying, but life's been so unfair lately." I made the payment. I always did. But she was telling another story behind my back. My Aunt Diane stopped returning my calls, which is when I realized the transition had occurred. Then Uncle Frank began responding to me in the family group chat with icy one-word responses. Even Mom's texts eventually become more aloof. I initially believed that I was dreaming, and that perhaps they were simply preoccupied. However, when my cousin Matthew unintentionally sent me a screenshot from another group chat, the reality hit me like a ton of bricks. Vanessa wrote, "Michael's not well. He's been stealing from Vanessa for months. We're worried about him. He's so resentful of our success. He's trying to turn the family against me." There. It was as simple as day. She was causing them poisoning. For a minute I was unable to breathe. Is it theft? Her debts were paid by me. She wasn't done though. It intensified a few weeks later. Suddenly my dad called me. His voice was icy. Not the same. "Son, we need to talk. Your sister told us everything. If you're struggling, just admit it. But dragging Vanessa down, that's unacceptable." I made an effort to clarify. I made an effort to be honest with them, that I had spent years helping her. However, they refused to listen. Mom interrupted. "Why would Vanessa lie? She's your sister. Family doesn't lie." That's what they always say. Family is honest. But they were constantly lying. Then the phony evidence surfaced. How she did it is beyond me. Perhaps a tech-savvy friend or a cheap app. However, Vanessa managed to produce screenshots of text messages that appeared to show me threatening her, demanding money back, and even using derogatory language I never used. She even had audio recordings. Voice recordings that have been edited. Spliced and altered, my voice was pieced together from previous voicemails. In one I almost yelled, "You owe me, you're worthless." Those were phrases I had never spoken. Never. However, the tone and timestamps were all meticulously crafted to appear authentic. And it was sufficient for my parents. Dad stated, "You need help, Michael," during one of our final phone conversations. "We won't let you ruin Vanessa's life any further." I ended the call. They didn't want the truth, I recognized then. They desired a villain. Vanessa also gave them one. Meanwhile, the planning of the celebration went on without me. Vanessa assumed complete command. Every day she shared updates on Facebook, including images of the location, the custom cake taste, and floral arrangements. Each post concluded in the same manner. "All for Dad." I spared no expense because family means everything. The comments came flooding in. "You're amazing, Jess. Your brother could learn a thing or two." As if I didn't exist, I silently observed my own family members cheering her on with love reactions and emoticons. As if I hadn't spent almost $10,000 on this party that they acted like hers. However, Vanessa committed a single error. Her digital fingerprints are all over the place. The payment receipts were still with me. All in my name. The wire moves. Everything connected to my accounts, including the bills from the caterer, florist and event coordinator. I kept everything. Each and every screenshot. Every message. Each transfer. All lies. The last public humiliation followed. My Uncle Henry made the following message in the family chat 2 days before to the celebration. "It's a shame Michael won't be at the party. Maybe it's for the best. He's been unstable lately." Aunt Diane then added, "Vanessa worked so hard for this, Michael would have just made it uncomfortable." They weren't only leaving me out. I was being erased. Vanessa had prevailed. Or so she believed. The intended purpose was a laid-back coffee cafe. Neutral territory. However, I went with the Glass House, a tiny, peaceful botanical cafe hidden behind a downtown antique bookshop. Soft instrumental music is playing over the mutter of distant voices, and there are bright glass walls with lush green plants hanging from every corner. It appeared to be innocuous. Calm. Peace was going to die here today, which is why I chose it. Together they arrived. As usual, Dad took the lead. Tense shoulders, piercing gaze, chilly, clipped voice. Despite the fact that we were indoors, Vanessa followed him while wearing sunglasses. As usual, Mom lingered in between, trying to read the air with anxiously darting eyes. They took a seat on the other side of me. Dad fired the first shot before anyone else spoke. "Michael, let's not waste everyone's time. You've caused enough damage. Your sister has been through hell because of your accusations. This ends today." His voice was sharp but low as he leaned forward. "You're our son, but you need to take responsibility for what you've done. You've embarrassed this family." Like the queen she believed herself to be, Vanessa grinned and crossed her arms. Mom just said in a whisper, "Please, let's have a calm conversation." I didn't wince. I spent months getting ready for this. I put a heavy folder on the table and pushed it carefully toward the center without saying anything. "Before we pretend who the victim is, let's look at the facts." Dad laughed. "What is this, Michael?" Calmly, "Receipts," I said. I opened the folder. A timeline is inside. Transactions were printed neatly, bank records, the venue, catering and decoration invoices. "I paid for the party," I stated bluntly. "My name is on everyone. Every dime. Vanessa hasn't spent a penny." Vanessa's mouth tensed. I continued. "Here are the credit card payments I made to cover her debt last year. Here are the bank transfers I sent every month when Dad's investments collapsed. Here are the text messages where Vanessa asked for help, not the ones she fabricated." I tapped the page that followed. She produced color prints of the altered screenshots. I brought the originals and the fake ones, side by side. "It's impressive how far you went to create your little story, Vanessa." Vanessa's expression wavered. She moved in her seat but said nothing. Dad's voice lifted. "Enough of this crap, Michael. You're twisting everything. These are misunderstandings. Old issues, you're making it worse." "Are they?" I inquired, remaining composed. I reached into my pocket and took out a USB stick. "This is a recovery from Vanessa's own hard drive. She never deletes anything, including her audio montages." I hit the play button on my laptop. Broken, badly edited voice clips abound in the cafe. Spliced, chopped, my voice. Choppy changes. Then I said, "You're worthless." You ruin everything. The next one. It was obvious to anyone listening that it was phony. A poor word collage. Vanessa's expression went white. Mom finally said something at that point, forceful but quiet. Vanessa? Is this true? Vanessa stopped. She parted her lips, then shut them again. Her lip quivered. She stammered. I didn't mean for it to get this far. He was trying to turn you against me. I had to protect myself. By inventing threats? I responded. Dad attempted to intervene. Michael's always been unstable. You know how sensitive he gets. Mom interrupted him though. She was steady, but her voice cracked. No, Mark. No more. I can't keep pretending. I've seen enough. She turned to face Vanessa. I defended you because you're my daughter, but this is sick. Panic flooded Vanessa's gaze. Mom, don't do this. You used him, you lied. You twisted everything, she said in a broken voice. And we let you. It was ruthless silence. Vanessa sprang to her feet, snatched up her handbag, and rushed out of the cafe, pushing past a waiter. A number of patrons turned to observe. Dad's fists clenched. He gave me a growl and asked, Are you happy now? Not happy, was my response. Done. Anger filled his face. But before he could speak another word, Mom took hold of his arm. She was so tired, not angry, that tears streamed down her cheeks as she gazed at me. I'm sorry, Michael. I got to my feet. It's too late, sorry. I then departed. Behind me, in the hushed remains of their shattered falsehoods, stood the ideal little glass cafe. I would never be under their power again. The encounter at the glass house was just the start. I knew one thing when I left that cafe. They would reassemble if I left them standing. They did it every time. For them, lies were like oxygen. They would suffocate if the supply were cut off. I had no intention of leaving any air. I had a meeting with my lawyer 2 days later. Claire was her name. Brilliant, cold, and just the type of person you want to hire after you've had enough of being nice. I put everything on the table as we sat in her downtown office, including fraud documents, audio files, fake texts, and financial information. The entire collection of years they believed I would not discuss. Claire did not blink as she flipped through the folders. She stated bluntly, They're going to regret underestimating you. The first round of lawsuits was filed the following morning. Deception, theft of identity, slander, financial abuse, fraud via wire. A full-scale, lawful artillery attack. The first person served was Vanessa. When she opened the envelope, how did she look? Priceless. Within 48 hours she stopped posting on social media. Then Dad arrived. Everything was uncovered by Claire's team, including the business loans co-signed with fake signatures, the unpaid taxes, and the retirement money he embezzled under my name. Within a week the IRS launched a parallel probe. He made an effort to defend himself. Sent irate SMS and threatening voicemails. You want to destroy your own family? You'll regret this, Michael. I didn't answer. My lawyer did. All further communication must go through legal counsel. Mom was the first to break. After 3 weeks, she wrote me a lengthy, heartfelt email. Michael, I know things got out of hand. We're still your parents. We can fix this. You don't have to go this far. Family should forgive, not punish. Please talk to me. I didn't directly respond. Claire returned a single sentence. All negotiations will be handled through our office. The walls were closing in on them all by the second month. Vanessa was charged with identity theft and evidence falsification. While the investigation was ongoing, the judge put a halt to her statements. Overnight, her life as an influencer disappeared. She put a desperate GoFundMe link before removing it, and that was the last thing I saw. No one made a donation. The blow to Dad was even more severe. Fines were imposed by the IRS. His business license was revoked by the state. Loans went into default once the banks called. Like a sandcastle in the tide, his real estate business, which he had founded on conceit and deceit, fell apart. An old family friend told me that in order to pay for the escalating legal bills, he sold his property in a matter of weeks. They tugged threads behind closed doors for years, always believing I was too helpless to resist. Once they were correct. No more. My lawyer gave me the last update over the phone at the conclusion of the 3rd month. We're finished. Vanessa narrowly escaped going to jail by accepting a plea deal that included steep fines and long-term financial limitations after entering her pleas to multiple offenses. Dad consented to a large settlement, which included payment for the years of deception that were carried out in your name. My hands briefly trembled when I noticed the balance of the entire compensation that had been deposited into my account. The money wasn't even the main factor. It was the quiet that followed. Not a single call, message, or drama for the first time in years. They had vanished. I had freedom. I made an appointment with the courthouse a month later. It was silent and swift. When I signed the documents, the clerk hardly raised her head. I altered my last name with a single signature. I abandoned the moniker they had used to manipulate me and tarnish me with their falsehoods. It was now solely theirs, and their failure. I felt a weight finally leave my chest as I walked out of that courthouse into the brilliant morning light. I was out of hiding. I wasn't erased by them. I was formed by them. I imagined that liberation would feel like anger, triumph, or retribution. However, it seemed to be quiet. Silence was lovely too. I never woke up to texts requesting money for the first time in my life. No voicemails that make you feel guilty. No signals of concern that are actually passive-aggressive. Simply be silent. As well as her. 3 months after the legal dust cleared, I got to meet Emily. I wasn't even searching for anything at first. I was still reconstructing myself, not just my life. Without the incessant din of my family's expectations, I hardly knew who I was. However, she noticed me. Not me in my damaged state. Not the antagonist that my sister depicted. Not the failure my dad made fun of. Me. After I eventually moved into a place that was all mine, we sat together one evening in my apartment. Only my name appears on the documents. As she silently leafed through the folder I'd shown no one else, the warm city light flooded through the windows. The whole history. The falsehoods. The legal actions. Devastation. The resurrection. I kept a close eye on her face while she read. When she did look up, her eyes were filled with admiration, rather than fear or sympathy. She said, "No one ever realized how strong you are. And stronger than you think." I didn't believe it until then. The months went by like chapters that I never imagined I would be able to write. Together, we constructed something. Easy. Sincerely, actual. Coffee runs in the morning, walks late at night, and lengthy conversations about everything and nothing. She never made any requests. She never gave me the impression that I owed her anything in return for her devotion. However, the past always wants to reappear, much like decay. It began modestly. An email from an unidentified sender. Then I received an SMS from an unfamiliar number. Then another. And yet another. Mom. My dad. Vanessa too. Their voices sounded like a frantic chorus. "We've made mistakes. Let's move forward. Family is forever. You've proven your point. Can we start fresh? Don't let outsiders poison your blood." Outsiders. It was a word that told it all. Because Emily was not under their control, they continued to view her as a threat, since she didn't participate in their game. One evening, I warned her. "They'll keep trying." She grinned and said, "Then we'll keep ignoring them." And we did. We strolled through the downtown streets hand in hand one evening as summer finally gave way to fall. The walkways were adorned with dazzling reds and golds from the leaves. Her palm felt warm to me despite the frigid weather. I used to avoid the riverwalk since it was full of memories of what I felt I had lost, but we stopped close to it. It was just another lovely vista now. She leaned close to me. She whispered, "Do you ever regret cutting them off?" I paused to reflect. "No," I replied. "Because I never really cut them off. They cut themselves off the moment they chose to break me." She gave my hand a squeeze. "And they failed." I grinned. Not resentful. Not upset. Simply free. That night the phone buzzed again. One more email. One more appeal. I didn't even crack it open. Rather, I pulled out my camera, raised it, and snapped a photo of us. Just standing there. Grinning. Alive. Everything my family never understood was represented in the picture. You don't get peace by default. You have to battle for it. I whispered, partly to myself but loud enough for her to hear, as we made our way back home under the city lights. They tried to bury me. Instead, I bloomed. I meant it too. Every single syllable. My parents said I was too stressful for Christmas, let my sister call the shots. Now they're homeless while I'm spending the holidays in peace. I, a 31-year-old man, was sitting on my beat-up leather couch last December, surfing around Reddit on my phone while watching ESPN in the background. It was one of those dreary Sunday afternoons when you don't really care about the game but need anything to fill the emptiness of your lonely flat. Outside it was beginning to snow, one of those heavy silent snowfalls that makes the world seem quieter, the kind that accumulates up on windowsills and transforms streetlights into fuzzy halos. My apartment isn't particularly appealing. It's a one-bedroom in the less desirable section of town, but the rent is low enough that I can save a little money each month. The walls are too thin, the neighbors are excessively noisy, and the heater never works properly. But it is mine. I pay for it through my construction job, which is not glamorous by any means, but pays the bills. I've been with the same employer for 5 years, working my way up from basic laborer to crew supervisor. My hands are constantly rough, and my back is always sore, but there's something rewarding about making something with your own two hands that office workers will never comprehend. At the very least, it pays my bills, and it appears to do the same for others. When my phone rang with Dad's name, I nearly didn't answer. The last 3 times he called, it was to borrow money for a household emergency. First there was the water heater, then the property taxes, and then a plumbing disaster. But family remains family, right? That's what I kept telling myself anyway. That's what kept me sending money month after month, even though I should have been saving for my future. "Hey, what's up?" I asked, muting the television. "Jake," my father remarked. His voice seems casual, as if we just spoke yesterday, despite the fact that I hadn't heard from any of them in 3 weeks. "Listen, about Christmas this year, we think it's better if you don't come." I sat up straight and nearly dropped my phone. The game on the TV continued, but all I could hear was the blood rushing through my ears. "What?" I managed to ask, thinking that I had misheard him. He let out the frustrated sigh he'd mastered over the years, the one that makes you feel like you're still a 10-year-old questioning why the sky is blue. "Sierra's having a rough time lately. You know how sensitive she gets. All that tension between you two. It's just easier for everyone if you sit this one out." My sister Sierra, of course. The golden child. The one who could do no wrong, even when she completely fouled everything up. 2 years older than me, yet still handled as if she were made of glass. "Let me get this straight," I started slowly, trying to maintain my conversational tone. "You're uninviting me from Christmas, family Christmas, because Sierra is having a rough time?" "Don't make this a big deal, Jake," Dad said impatiently. I could almost picture him waving his hand dismissively, like he often did when I brought up something important to me. "It's just one day. You'll survive." That's when I felt something crack within me, like a wire that had been pulled too tightly for too long. All of my animosity, aggravation, and instances when I'd bitten my tongue for the sake of family harmony rose to the surface at once. "One day," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to keep it under control. "And what about the $7,000 I've paid toward your mortgage this year? Does that mean nothing? Am I just good enough to pay your bills but not good enough to sit at your table?" There was a long, uneasy hush on the other end of the telephone. I could hear him breathing, probably trying to figure out how to coax me into backing down, like he always did. Eventually, he cleared his throat. "That's different. You offered to help out. Don't throw that in our faces now." I stood up and paced my modest living room, the floor cracking beneath my feet. 3 steps forward, then 3 steps back. The space felt suddenly too small and restricting, like if the walls were closing in. "I've been paying your mortgage for 2 years, $7,000 just this year alone, ever since Sierra's stupid tech startup crashed and burned, and you guys bailed her out instead of making her face consequences like an actual adult. But sure, I offered to do it." "We appreciate it, Jake," he replied in that arrogant tone that made me want to smash a wall, the same tone he used when I informed him I was going to trade school instead of college. "But this isn't about money, it's about family. Sierra needs a stress-free environment right now. She's in a very vulnerable place." I stepped to my window and watched the snow build up on the street below. My reflection began, back at me. Tired eyes, 3-day stubble, the appearance of a man who has been taken advantage of for far too long. Behind me, on my coffee table, stood a stack of bills that I had been putting off paying, because as usual, I had sent my parents' mortgage money first. Family. I laughed, and the sound was terrible even to my own ears. It's funny how I'm family when you need my money but not when it's time to gather around the Christmas tree. It's funny how Sierra's vulnerable place is more important than the fact that I've been working tirelessly to keep a roof over all of your heads. "You're being dramatic," he began. But I'd had enough of being stopped, dismissed, and serving as the family's ATM. No, Dad. You made your choice. Enjoy your Sierra-friendly Christmas, but don't expect another dime from me. Not tomorrow, not next month, not ever again. I hung up before he could react, throwing my phone onto the couch as if it were burning my hand. My heart was beating, and my hands were trembling with wrath and possibly relief. For once, I stood up for myself rather than simply accepting it. I grabbed my laptop from the side table and sat back down, launching my banking app. It was time to make a life-changing decision. Let me tell you about my ideal sister, Sierra, a 29-year-old woman. I need you to comprehend what I've been going through all these years. Honor roll student, college volleyball star, homecoming queen, mom's darling angel and dad's clever girl, the kind of sister who borrowed your belongings without asking and then behaved like you were the jerk when you demanded them back. She got a car for her 16th birthday, whilst I got a watch for mine. She never had to have a summer job since she needed to focus on her studies, yet I've been mowing lawns since I was 14. Our childhood bedroom doors reveal the entire story. Hers was decorated with ribbons, medals, and prizes. Mine received only one participation award from Little League, which Dad described as a good start, with a disappointed expression in his eye. She resigned her solid marketing job 2 years ago to start this innovative fitness software called Fit Focus, or something like that, with the firm belief that it would make millions. Mom and Dad devoured it like it was gospel truth. She's so entrepreneurial, Mom would exclaim during our occasional phone calls. That's my girl, taking risks, Dad would say at family dinners where I was still invited back then. They didn't only offer her emotional support. They went all in, remortgaging their nearly paid-off property to provide her with $80,000 in launch funds. They did not even hesitate. When did I decide that I wanted to go trade school rather than college? That was short-sighted, Jake. You're wasting your potential. When did I need $2,000 for my certification courses? We're not made of money. What about Sierra's half-baked app idea? Here's our life savings and the deed to our house. The application launched, crashed, and burnt. The entire project failed within 3 months due to server difficulties, design defects, and a lack of a marketing strategy. My sister's amazing notion turned out to be little more than an Instagram filter plus a calorie tracker packed in a clunky interface that crashed all the time. She hadn't even bothered to test it thoroughly before launching. Why should she? Nothing had ever been difficult for her before. Mom and Dad were suddenly on the hook for a hefty mortgage that they couldn't afford, despite Dad's postal worker's salary and Mom's part-time receptionist job. They were going to lose their house. I grew up in this house. Despite everything, the house held some pleasant memories for me. And guess who stepped forward? Me. Jake. The disappointment. The one who squandered his potential with construction work. I was not living up to the family name by working with my hands. I began covering their mortgage payments. $583 each month, $7,000 this year alone. Money came directly out of my account while Sierra was uploading pictures of her healing retreats and her new MacBook Pro, which she allegedly needed for her job search. I've never complained. I just gritted my teeth and sent the money each month. I picked up extra shifts, worked on weekends. I skipped vacations. I drove my 10-year-old automobile with 170,000 miles on it, hoping it wouldn't break down. I lived in my terrible apartment, with noisy neighbors and erratic heating, because that was all I could afford while supporting 2 households. Sierra was living rent-free in their basement, raiding their fridge, watching Netflix, and discussing her next big idea, which was, definitely going to work out this time, guys. For real. Do you know what the worst part was? She never said, thank you. Never acknowledged that her failure had consequences, and that I bore the brunt of them. At Thanksgiving, which I was still welcome to at the time, she had the audacity to ask why I didn't have a real job with my full potential, so I could afford a better automobile. I almost choked on my turkey. And now I was not invited for Christmas, the one day of the year when even the most dysfunctional families pretend to enjoy one another for a few hours. The day I'd been secretly looking forward to, because it meant a great lunch that I didn't have to cook myself, and the sense of belonging somewhere, even if just for a couple hours. I grabbed my laptop and logged into the bank account I had set up particularly for their mortgage payments. My name was on it since Dad couldn't figure out internet banking, and Mom simply laughed and said, "You're so good with money, Jake." There it was. $7,000 gone this year. Every dollar gained through backbreaking effort, lugging supplies in freezing temperatures and scorching heat. Each payment reminded me of the family who only wanted my pocketbook. I went to the automatic payment options and chose to cancel all scheduled payments. My finger briefly hovered over the confirm button before hitting it firmly. A message appeared, stating that all scheduled payments had been canceled. I went a step further and moved the funds I'd set aside for their January payment back into my own account before closing the laptop with a satisfying snap. For the first time in 2 years, I felt able to breathe again. I felt like I was regaining control of my own life. Let's see how exposed Sierra feels once the bank begins sending foreclosure notices. The next few weeks went by as usual, except that I was suddenly $583 richer every month. It's amazing how much breathing room this gives a guy. I even bought myself a new pair of work boots with extra arch support, which helps when you're on your feet for 10 hours a day. A modest luxury, but it felt enormous. Snow continued to accumulate outdoors. December in Michigan is no joke. The temperatures plunged into the teens, and the wind chill made them feel like negative figures. I kept showing up at job sites, swinging hammers and running saws, returning home with sawdust in my boots and concrete dust in my lungs. Everything became more difficult as the temperature dropped. Materials refused to cooperate, equipment took longer to warm up, and my fingers remained numb despite wearing heavy gloves. But you know what? I didn't mind it as much because every dime I earned was finally mine. There have been no calls from the family yet. For once, I just wanted to maintain the steady pace of my own existence. Friday night, I met up with my friend Chris at a pizza joint near his apartment. We've been pals since we were kids, sneaking cigarettes under the high school gym. He's now a plumber, earning decent money when people's pipes burst in the winter, which is pretty much a guaranteed income stream in Michigan from December to March. The place was full with Friday revelers, couples on dates, families with boisterous children, and groups of friends beginning their weekend. Classic rock playing over the speakers, the scent of pepperoni and cheese in the air, and the continual talk of people having a good time. Chris passed a soda over the table to me, giving me a skeptical look. "You look different," he commented. "Less, I don't know," stretched out. "Like you're not carrying a piano on your back anymore." I took a long sip and let it all out. Dad's call, Sierra's turmoil, being barred from Christmas after covering their mortgage for 2 years in a row. Chris's jaw dropped, a half-eaten slice of pizza frozen halfway into his lips. "You're kidding me. They actually uninvited you after you've been paying their mortgage?" I nodded and grabbed a chunk of the pie between us. "Yep. So I canceled all the payments. They don't know yet." He threw his head back and laughed so loudly that the table next to us looked up. "Holy man, that's cold as ice. When will they find out?" "End of the month, when the payment doesn't go through. Right after Christmas." I couldn't stop the grin from creeping across my face. First, they have the perfect family Christmas without me. Then they get a call from the bank regarding their missed payment. Chris lifted a glass. "Don't be a doormat anymore." We clinked our drinks. For the first time in years, I felt in charge of my own life. "You know they're going to freak out, right?" Chris asked, wiping the pizza grease from his beard. "Like a nuclear meltdown level freak out." I shrugged. "Let them. I'm done caring." "Good for you, man," he said, nodding. "About damn time. I've been watching you kill yourself for them for 2 years while they treat you like garbage. Should have cut them off a long time ago." He was correct, of course. I should have. But there's something about family, some foolish, ingrained loyalty, that makes you keep trying even when it's evident you're the only one making an attempt. The days went by. For Christmas I purchased myself a 55-inch smart TV that works. Why not? It was my money. I even got one of those fake trees from Walmart and placed it in the corner of my living room. I put a couple of wrapped presents under it, just things I bought for myself, but it made the room look festive. If I didn't go to their Christmas party, I'd make my own. Meanwhile, neither of them had called. Not Mom, to make sure I was okay. Not Dad, to apologize. Sierra would never thank me for providing a roof over her ungrateful head for the past 2 years. Just silence. And for once, the silence felt lovely. I went grocery shopping and splurged on ingredients for a proper Christmas dinner. Not the dried-out turkey and lumpy mashed potatoes Mom used to make, but a lovely steak, some roasted potatoes, and fresh green beans. The type of meal I never bothered to prepare for myself, since it seemed like too much work. As I was packing my cart, I ran across Mrs. Peterson, an old neighbor from when I was growing up. She seemed surprised to see me. "Jake. How are you, dear? Getting ready for Christmas with your parents? I just saw your mother yesterday at the store. She was buying so much food. As usual, that woman always cooks enough for the army." I forced a smile. Actually, I'm not going this year. Just having a quiet one at my place. Her face fell. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Is everything okay? Everything's fine, I lied. Just a change of plans this year. As I went away, I imagined them putting up their normal holiday decorations. Mom hung the stockings, one for each of them, but none for me this year. Dad battled with the tree lights, while Sierra sat on the couch, most likely reading through Instagram rather than helping. I put a container of ice cream in my trolley and smiled. They didn't know what I was on my way. The first communication arrived 3 days before Christmas. I was at Home Depot, getting materials for a side job I'd picked up to fill the idle week between Christmas and New Year's, when my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Jake, honey, the bank called about the mortgage payment. They said it didn't go through. Is everything okay with the account? I slid the phone back into my pocket without answering. Allow them to sweat. 2 hours later, Dad called. I immediately sent it to voicemail. His message was less appealing. Jake, what's going on with the mortgage payment? Call me back right away. I did not. Then followed Sierra's text, usually the last to notice a problem, but the first to make demands. Jake, Mom and Dad are freaking out about the mortgage. Fix it now. I was sitting on my new couch, watching TV, and eating pizza as a treat when I decided to answer. Not to her, but to Mom. Sorry, can't help with the mortgage anymore. Tight budget. Christmas is expensive, you understand. Short. Director. They gave me a casual dismissal. Her response arrived nearly immediately. What? But we're counting on that money, Jake. We can't make the payment without you. I took another mouthful of pizza, allowing the cheese to stretch and eventually snap. That's tough. Maybe Sierra can help out. She lives there rent-free anyway. Then I silenced my phone and returned to the nature documentary I was watching, which was about penguins. Interesting stuff. The following morning, I had 8 missed calls and 3 voicemails from Dad, each one angrier than the last. The final one was an actual explosion. Jake, you can't just stop paying with no warning. The bank says we're already late. Call me back now. Sierra sent a series of progressively frantic texts. WTF, Jake. Answer your phone. You're ruining everything on purpose. Mom is crying because of you. Good. Let her cry. Allow them to experience what it's like to be the people no one cares about. I texted Mom once again. Sorry. Already spent the money on Christmas gifts for myself. Good luck with the payment. I then blocked all 3 of them. Christmas was just 2 days away, and for the first time, I was looking forward to spending it alone. That afternoon, I saw my neighbor Tom in the parking lot. He's a nice guy who works nights as a security guard and always brings in my things while they're waiting outside my door. Hey man, you're looking cheerful, he commented as he assisted me in transporting my new TV box from the car. Hot date for Christmas? I laughed. Nah, just treating myself this year, family-free holiday. Lucky you, he grumbled, guiding the box through my tight threshold. I've got the in-laws coming. 3 days of my father-in-law telling me I mounted the TV wrong, and my mother-in-law rearranging my kitchen cabinets. We brought the TV inside, and I offered him a couple of Pepsi from my fridge in appreciation. As he left, he turned back. Hey, if you're on your own for Christmas, why don't you come over for dinner? Rachel always makes too much food anyway. No pressure, just if you want to. The offer astonished me. It was the first genuine invitation I had received in a long time. Thanks, man. I'll think about it. I thought about it. It was great to know that someone wanted me around for Christmas, and not just my money. Christmas morning brought another heavy snowstorm. I slept in until 10 o'clock, which is something I never get to do because of my job schedule. There is no alarm, no need to rush to the employment location, and no family duties. Simply peace and quiet. I cooked myself a full breakfast, bacon, eggs, the works. Poured some fine coffee I had purchased, and put on the Christmas music channel just because I could. Around noon, someone began hammering on my door, the type of pounding that indicates business. Not Tom's friendly knock or the delivery man's fast rap. Through the peephole I saw Dad standing there in his winter coat, his face flushed with either cold or fury, most likely both, and his breath creating small clouds in the icy corridor air. I opened the door while keeping the chain on. Merry Christmas, I replied, relishing the way his eyes furrowed. What the hell do you think you're doing? He exclaimed, his voice echoing down the hallway. The bank called again yesterday. We're late on the payment. I leaned against the doorframe. Yeah, that happens when you don't pay your bills. You know we can't afford it without you, he said, peering through the crack in the door at my apartment. I could see him noticing the Christmas tree, wrapped presents, and the new television in the background. Funny how that works, I said quietly. I can't afford to help people who don't consider me family enough to spend Christmas with. His face became an even deeper shade of red. This is childish, Jake. This is about our house. Your mother is beside herself. Should have thought about that before you kicked me out of Christmas. I shrugged. How's Sierra handling the stress? Still feeling vulnerable. This isn't about Sierra. It's always about Sierra, I interrupted him. Even now you're standing at my door on Christmas Day, not to invite me over, or apologize, but to demand money. That's all I am to you guys. An ATM. He changed tactics, his voice suddenly pleading. Jake, please. We'll lose the house. We're already behind. Not my problem anymore, I answered, shutting the door. He kept hammering and cursing before giving up and leaving. I heard his car start, the engine straining in the cold before eventually turning over. I returned to my Christmas brunch, turned up the music, and made another cup of coffee. For the first time in years, I felt able to breathe. My phone flared up with a text from an unfamiliar number. Mom was using Sierra's phone to bypass my block. Jake, please, we need you. We're family. I wrote back, families don't uninvite members from Christmas to keep the golden child comfortable. Families don't take $7,000 from someone and then throw them away. Merry Christmas. Then I blocked Sierra's phone number and spent the rest of the day in glorious tranquil solitude. I cooked my steak properly, medium rare, just like I like it. The potatoes were crunchy on the exterior and fluffy inside. I ate at my small table with genuine napkins and a real plate, rather than the paper ones I usually use. I even got myself a tiny apple pie for dessert. After dinner, I opened the gifts I'd wrapped for myself, which included new headphones, a couple of video games I'd been wanting, and a decent watch to replace the cheap one that had finally died after 5 years. Small things, but things I denied myself because the $583 had to go to them first. As I was trying out the headphones, there was another faint knock on the door. Mom. I ignored it, cranked up the level on my headphones, and pretended I could not hear. She knocked for a while before giving up. Later I discovered a card she had slid under the door. Inside came the standard generic Christmas message, signed Love, Mom and Dad. It wasn't even written personally for me, it was a store-bought card that they presumably had plenty of. There was no indication of expressing sorry for not inviting me. There was no acknowledgement of anything I had done for them. Simply a card that might have been handed to anyone. I threw it in the garbage and returned to my tranquil evening. Around 8 p.m., Tom texted to ask if I wanted to come over for dessert and games. I took him up on it and spent the evening with his family, playing board games and eating handmade cookies. His kids were actually rather cool. We discussed construction because the 10-year-old was quite interested in it. His wife, Rachel, was friendly and accommodating, never making me feel like a charity case. I walked back to my place at around midnight. The snowfall had finally ceased. The world is silent and still. For a family-free Christmas, it hadn't been too horrible. The week between Christmas and New Year's was when things truly became bad for them. On the 26th, I got up early to go to my side job, which was to hang drywall in a basement remodeling for 6 hours. The work was difficult, but the compensation was decent, and it kept my mind occupied. When I arrived home, sweating and covered in drywall dust despite my mask, Chris was waiting in his truck in the parking lot. Dude, he began when I arrived. You've got to hear this. My cousin Tommy lives down the street from your parents, remember? I nodded, opened my door and beckoned for him to enter. They're in full panic mode, he said, following me inside and settling on my couch. Your dad's going around to everyone in the family asking for loans. Your mom was crying at your aunt's house yesterday, and apparently, Sierra's throwing absolute fits. I opened the fridge and grabbed 2 Pepsi, giving one to Chris. How bad is it? Bad, Chris said, grinning. They missed the payment completely. Bank sent some kind of notice. And get this, your dad had to cancel the cable and internet to try to scrape together some cash. That meant Sierra couldn't even binge Netflix in the basement anymore. That concept made me grin. Did your cousin say anything else? I inquired, relaxing into my new chair, another Christmas present for myself. Yeah, actually, the best part, your sister finally got a job. I almost choked on my drink. You're kidding me. Doing what? Cashier at Kroger, he said, laughing. Apparently she cried the whole first day because someone yelled at her about coupons. I leaned back, an odd combination of delight and something resembling sadness sweeping over me. Sierra had never had to deal with the real world before. She had never been shouted at by a client, had her feet ache after an 8-hour workday, or been concerned about whether her income would support her expenditures. "Welcome to the working world, sis," I mumbled. "It's not all Instagram filters and startup dreams out here." That night another SMS came in from an unknown number, my aunt this time. "Jake, honey. Your parents are in real trouble. They might lose the house. Can't you help them? Whatever happened between you, they're still your family." I texted back, "Ask Sierra to help. She's lived there rent-free for 2 years while I paid $7,000 toward their mortgage. They uninvited me from Christmas because I made Sierra uncomfortable. They made their choice." I haven't heard back from her. The next day, I was at the gym when my phone rang again, this time from an unknown number. This time, I responded. "Hello," I said between sets of the bench press. "Jake," said my mother, her voice weak and wavering. "The bank, they're threatening foreclosure if we don't catch up on payments. We don't have the money." I sat up, wiping the sweat from my forehead with a towel. "That sounds like a problem for you, Sierra, and Dad to figure out." "Please," she implored, and I could hear her cry. "We'll lose the house. We have nowhere to go." "Should have thought about that before you chose Sierra over me," I told you. "Jake, it wasn't like that." "It was exactly like that," I interrupted her. 2 years I've been paying your mortgage. 2 years of extra shifts and weekend work. And the one time I want to be included in a family holiday, I'm told I'm not welcome because precious Sierra needs a stress-free environment? Well, now you can all be stressed together." There was a long pause, broken only by her muffled sobbing. "Jake," she finally whispered. "We're sorry. We made a mistake. Please help us." "Too late," I answered before hanging up. New Year's Eve arrived, and Tom invited me over again for a small group. Him, Rachel, another couple from the building, and I. We played cards, ate way too many snacks, and watched the ball drop on television. At midnight, my phone lit up with another text from my aunt. "Your parents got an eviction warning. 30 days to pay or get out. Please, Jake. They have nowhere to go." I showed it to Tom, who shook his head in shock. "Man, that's rough. Family drama at its finest, huh?" "Yeah," I said, putting away my phone without responding. "But not my circus, not my monkeys anymore." Rachel, who had clearly been filled in by Tom, offered me a compassionate look. "Family can be the worst sometimes. But also the best. It's complicated." I nodded without saying anything. I was not prepared to forgive them. Perhaps I never would be. Later that night, as I walked back to my apartment, I realized I had spent more time with Tom's family in the previous week than I had with my own in months. These folks, who barely knew me, treated me with more warmth and real concern than those who were meant to love me unconditionally. Perhaps family was not about blood after all. Perhaps it was about who truly cared about you as a person, rather than what you could do for them. January dragged by, chilly and unforgiving. I kept busy at work, saved the money that would have gone toward their mortgage, and even began attending a weekly poker night with some of the construction crew members. My life was settling into a new rhythm that was not centered on my family's needs. For the first time in years, I met Lena, a girl who worked at a coffee shop near my flat. Nothing serious yet. Just casual conversation every time I stopped in. But she had scribbled her phone number on my cup last week, and I was gathering up the nerve to call it. Then, one freezing Sunday morning, there was another knock on my door. This time, all three of them, Mom, Dad, and Sierra, stood in the hallway, looking as if they hadn't slept in days. Mom's eyes were red from crying. Dad looked 10 years older than the last time I saw him. Sierra, gorgeous, precious Sierra, had black circles under her eyes and was dressed in a Kroger uniform underneath her coat. "Can we come in?" Dad inquired, his voice losing the power it previously had. I pondered for a moment before stepping aside. They walked in quietly, taking in my new TV, the fresh paint on the walls. Another weekend project I had time for now that I wasn't working additional jobs to finance their mortgage. And the general sensation that I was doing just fine without them. Sierra mumbled, "Nice place." And I noticed a flash of hatred in her eyes. "What do you want?" I inquired, not offering them chairs. Dad cleared his throat. "The bank. They're foreclosing. We have 2 weeks to get out of the house." I folded my arms. And we have nowhere to go," Mom explained, her voice shaking. "We can't afford an apartment. With the credit hit we're taking, no one will rent to us." I glanced at each one in turn. Sounds like a real problem. What does it have to do with me? Sierra burst into tears, not the charming, delicate crying she typically used to get her way, but ugly, desperate cries. We up, okay? Is that what you want to hear? We up. I be up. I'm sorry. Mom looked surprised by her language. Dad only stared at the floor. We were wrong, Dad said gently. About Christmas. About everything. We took you for granted. I laughed, but there was nothing funny about it. Did you take me for granted? You treated me like an ATM for 2 years, and then threw me away because I was no longer convenient. That's not taking me for granted. It's exploitation. We know, Mom whispered. We were terrible to you. I turned to Sierra. And you, the queen of the castle. Nothing to say? She wiped her nose on her sleeve and appeared smaller than I had ever seen her. I've been working at Kroger, she said, as if that clarified everything. People are so mean. My feet hurt all the time, and I only make $400 a week. Welcome to the real world, I responded. The one I've been living in while you played entrepreneur with Mom and Dad's money, then sat on your ass while I paid the price for your failure. I know, she said, new tears flowing down her cheeks. I was spoiled, and entitled, and selfish. I never thanked you. I never even thought about what you were doing for us. Dad stepped forward. We're not here to ask for money, Jake. It astonished me. Then what do you want? Forgiveness, Mom replied. And a place to stay. Just until we can get back on our feet. I looked at them in bewilderment. You want to live here? With me? In my 1-bedroom apartment? Dad nodded. We have nowhere else to go. I began laughing. I couldn't help it. The absurdity of the situation was overwhelming. Let me get this straight, I remarked when I could talk again. You uninvite me from Christmas because I make Sierra uncomfortable. You took my money for 2 years without a single thank you. And now that I've cut you off and you're facing the consequences of your actions, you want to move in with me. They looked at each other and then back at me. We have nowhere else to go, Mom insisted, as if it altered anything. I stepped to the window and looked down at the snow-covered parking lot. For 2 years, I had been at their mercy, straining myself to exhaustion for people who didn't even want me at Christmas dinner. Now they were at my mercy, desperate, destitute, and seeing me as their only alternative. I turned around to face them. No. No? Dad reiterated. No, I confirmed. You can't stay here. Not now. Not ever. But where will we go? Mom questioned, her eyes welling up. I shrugged. That's not my problem anymore. You made your choices. Now you live with them. Please, Jake, Sierra begged. I'll sleep on the floor. I'll pay rent. I'll do anything. Like you should have been doing for the past 2 years, I responded with. Too late now. Dad's expression tightened. So that's it? You're just going to throw your family out on the street? Family? I repeated. You stopped being my family the moment you decided I wasn't good enough to sit at your Christmas table. The only thing you wanted from me was my money. Well, the ATM is closed. I went to the door and opened it. I think we're done here. They remained still at first, as if they could not believe what was occurring. Jake, Mom tried once more. Please reconsider, we're begging you. It feels terrible, doesn't it? I grumbled, to beg someone for help and be refused. To be thrown away when you're no longer useful. Maybe now you understand how I felt. They filed out one by one. Sierra persevered, her Kroger name badge glinting in the hallway light. Where will you go? I inquired, not because I cared, but because I needed to understand the extent of their despair. Mom's coworker said we could use her garage for a few days, he remarked. After that, I don't know. I nodded. Good luck with that. As I closed the door, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For 2 years, I'd carried them, paid their bills, handled their difficulties, and played the responsible role while they coddled Sierra and took advantage of my kindness. They are now gone. They had their own concerns. And I was free. I grabbed my phone and scrolled to the number Lena had scrawled on my coffee cup last week. Perhaps it was time to experience what else life has to offer aside from family strife. The next day at work, one of my co-workers inquired if I had a good weekend. I grinned and mentioned that it had been productive. I did not reveal my family's visit or their dire position. These were no longer my worries. For the first time in years, I was providing for myself. They might lose everything. My parents cut me off on Thanksgiving, then bought my brother a lake house with my money. Now they're behind bars, seeking second chance. My name is Ethan. My age is 32, and my own father told me he didn't have a son on Thanksgiving Day, staring me in the face. Tell me where you're watching from in the comment section before I explain how that one heartbreaking moment prompted the FBI to search their $1 million lake house and discover a felony that landed them all in jail. Every trip down memory lane was the drive to my parents' house. It was a treasured tradition to travel 2 hours from the concrete canyons of Manhattan to the peaceful, tree-lined lanes of my hometown in suburban New Jersey. With each mile marker, I would feel the constant tightness in my shoulders release as I rolled down the windows of my BMW and let the cool November air replace the city haze. I worked at Morgan Stanley as a senior investment banker. My life was filled with high-stakes meetings, billion-dollar deals, and the kind of strain that wears people down. However, this drive served as my escape. It was my way of returning to being just Ethan. The brother, the son. I was very drawn to home this year. I recently finished a contract that I had been working on for 6 exhausting months. Although it was a huge success for the company, I was left feeling exhausted and unable to function. With an unexpected sense of urgency, all I wanted was the smell of my dad's wood-burning fireplace, my mom's cooked turkey, and the comfortable, if occasionally obnoxious, banter with my younger brother Ryan. My mind visualized the scene. No amount of money could replace the warmth, the laughing, and the sense of community. The actual bonus I was anticipating was that I parked into the driveway of my childhood home, a traditional 2-story colonial with a warm red front door. It had an autumn leaf wreath hanging on it, which I knew belonged to my mother. Everything appeared just right, a picture-perfect example of suburban tranquility. My heart felt lighter than it had in months as I climbed up the well-known stone path, grabbing the pricey bottle of wine I had brought from the passenger seat and my briefcase, which included a Thanksgiving bonus check for them. I was already grinning when I rang the doorbell. The door opened wide. It was Thomas, my father. The entrance was totally blocked by a human wall as he stood there, broad-shouldered and motionless. His face was a mask of cold stone, usually prepared to meet with a rough but friendly demeanor. I said, "Hey Dad," with a shaky smile. The frigid draft from the entryway sucked away the warmth I had envisioned. "Happy Thanksgiving." He remained still. His eyes were like ice chips when he gazed at me. "We don't have a son," he stated in a flat, emotionless voice. For a moment, my brain refused to process the words because they were so strange and ridiculous. It must have been a strange, unfunny joke. I made an effort to laugh. "What? Dad, what are you talking about? It's me, Ethan." I could see movement behind him. With a deliberate casualness, my brother Ryan emerged from the corridor, resting against the wall. He had a smug, victorious look on his lips, but he wasn't smiling. He held a set of keys in his hand, jingling them repeatedly and softly. My former bedroom's keys. My father said, "Please leave," in a voice that was almost a whisper but had a sharp edge that pierced me more deeply than a shout could. I glanced from my brother's derisive grin to my father's vacant gaze. Just a few feet away, in a world I was abruptly and cruelly shut out of, I could smell the smell of roasting turkey and feel the warmth of the corridor. I refrained from arguing. I didn't beg. Something just snapped inside of me. Or perhaps it just fell into place. I nodded slightly and tightly, the motion being rigid and artificial. I walked back down the stone path, turned around, and closed the door of my car. There was silence in the world outside the windows. I gazed at the house that had all of my childhood memories, the crimson door, and the autumn wreath. I no longer called it home. When I took out my phone, a picture of my dad, Ryan, and I grinning from a previous family vacation appeared on the screen. A lovely, flawless falsehood. I drew my finger over my banking app. In the ashes of my heart, a clear, icy resolution started to take shape. They didn't only shut a door. They were unaware that they were going to lose the war they had just begun. It was physically difficult for me to breathe because of the silence in my automobile, which felt like a thick blanket weighing me down. I'm not sure how long I sat there, maybe a few minutes or an hour. Shock and pain had turned time into a dense, sticky blur. A frenzied parade of memories raced through my head as I looked for the first crack, the first indication that my life was based on sand. Last Christmas, I recalled. My yearly bonus, which has enough zeros to change most people's lives, had just arrived. My mother, Margaret, was the first person I called. There was a pattern. Their success was my success. A month earlier, I had overheard her discussing her knee discomfort with my aunt over the phone. The doctor had advised a complete replacement, but the insurance company would not pay for the state's top surgeon. She had stated it in her usual way, a martyred, sighing tone that was just right to be overheard and make people feel guilty. She had moaned, "I just don't know what we'll do. Your father's so worried. I suppose I'll just have to live with the pain." I deposited $45,000 into her account 2 days later. I didn't give it any second thought. "Get the best surgeon, Mom," I said to her over the phone. "Don't worry about the cost. Your health is everything." Her voice was so full of emotions of appreciation that I could practically hear them. "Oh, Ethan, you're our angel, our savior. What would we ever do without you? You work so hard, and you're so generous to your old parents." I recalled the rush of comfort I experienced at the time, the strong, alluring sensation of being the provider, the virtuous son, and the person who could find solutions to all of their issues. The long hours and restless nights were worthwhile because of it. A week later, I was looking through social media when I came upon a photo that Ryan had shared. In the California sun where he lived, he stood beside a brand new Mustang GT that was shining cherry red. The headline said, "Early Christmas from the best parents in the world. Time to hit the road. We're blessed." My mother's tone had immediately become defensive when I had gently questioned her about it. "Oh honey, you know Ryan. He works so hard at that car dealership of his. He deserved a little treat. It wasn't that expensive. Your father and I just wanted to see him happy. Don't be jealous, Ethan. Your time for nice things will come." My time. All of it was paid for by myself. I didn't say that though. I simply gulped down the harsh taste and declared, "I'm happy for him." My accomplishment, I reminded myself, was supposed to encourage them all. I was happy if they were happy. I told myself, nonetheless. The memory felt different now, sitting in the refrigerated car. It was rancid and polluted. Then another recollection, from my early years, came flooding back, crisper this time. Ryan was 8 and I was 12. Ryan, who usually wants to be the center of attention, was showing off by swinging the bat furiously while we were playing baseball in the backyard. He merely grinned at me when I told him to use caution. "Don't worry, I'm a pro," he had promised. He swung hard on the next pitch, sending the ball soaring through the large plate glass window in the living room. I paused as I saw the spider web of fissures and heard the horrible crash. Ryan, who was already an Oscar-winning actor, started crying right away and pointed a quivering finger at me. He cried out, "Ethan did it! He threw it too hard." As my father angrily bounded out of the house, I made an effort to clarify. "Dad, it was him. He hit it with the bat." However, it was pointless. My dad's gaze was fixed on me. The older one was me. I ought to have exercised greater responsibility. My objections were written off as weak justifications. I had to use the money from my summer job to help pay for the new window while I was grounded for a month. Ryan's bravery earned him ice cream. Later that evening, I caught a glimpse of him playing with his toys through his slightly ajar bedroom door, wearing a cunning little smirk. I had never experienced the chilly, lonely, and enraged sense of being the chosen scapegoat before. I was struck like a brick by a third memory from my time in college. My desired school, NYU, had accepted me, but it was pricey. Determined not to be a financial burden, I worked 2 part-time jobs to pay my bills, one at the library and one at a waiting table. I survived on cheap coffee and ramen. My parents sent me a card containing a $100 on my 21st birthday. A week later, Ryan, who was still in high school and had just turned 18, shared a photo of the brand new SUV that his amazing parents had purchased for him as an early graduation gift. "Ready for college road trips," was the caption. I recall feeling a deep, visceral sense of injustice as I stared at that photo in my small dorm room, while the smell of burnt coffee filled the air. A gentle rap on my window broke the trance. With my heart racing, I leaped. Mrs. Whitaker, who lived next door, was there. Her eyes were gentle and wrinkled, and she was in her late 70s. Her hugs had never been as warm as those of my own mother. All my life she had been my neighbor. She had always inquired about my job in the city with sincere concern, and had handed me cookies after school. With tears in her eyes, she had informed me how proud my grandmother Eleanor would have been of me. While attempting to make my face look natural, I rolled down the window. She gripped her cardigan and murmured, "Ethan dear, I saw you pull in. Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I was unable to form the words. What could I say? My father just disowned me. My family is a lie. She seems to comprehend. Gently. Never mind, she said. It's cold out here. I just wanted to say happy Thanksgiving. I was a little surprised to see you though. Your mother told me the whole family was heading up to Ryan's new lake house for the holiday. Everything shook on its axis. Lake house? I said again, the words jarring and unfamiliar. Ryan has a lake house? Mrs. Whitaker's expression became confused. Oh yes, Margaret was going on and on about it last week at the grocery store. A beautiful place on Lake Hopatkong apparently. She said Ryan's dealership was doing so well, he decided to treat the whole family to a new getaway home. She showed me pictures on her phone. It looked awfully expensive with a big boat dock and everything. She gave me a pat on the arm, bringing a tiny bit of warmth into my otherwise cold world. Well, perhaps I misunderstood. You have a good holiday, dear, and remember what your grandmother Eleanor used to say. A good heart is the only treasure that can't be stolen. I was left in a more profound and icy quiet than before she left. I kept thinking about what she had said about my grandmother. An irreplaceable gem. What is the property value of a lake house? $1 million? $2 million? In a faltering economy, on my brother's pay from a mid-size auto dealership? There was no way. At that point, the parts began to fit together to create a picture so hideous and grotesque that I couldn't bear to look at it, but I couldn't take my eyes off it. The transfers, each month. I provided them $2,000 for utilities and costs, $3,000 for the mortgage on this house, $1,500 for Ryan's auto payments, the very Mustang they bought him, $45,000 for the knee surgery, and countless more unforeseen bills and minor catastrophes. My mother had said in a voice full of lovely reason that I had opened a joint account for them years ago to help them control their spending. The only depositor was myself. They were the only ones who withdrew. I had complete faith in them. Their angel was me. Their source of income. My hands were shaking, yet all of a sudden my mind was clear and crisp. A cold, hard rage had joined the grief, which was still there, a raw, open wound. There was no miscommunication here. This deceit was lengthy, well thought out and incredibly nasty. This didn't require me to be at home. I traveled to a Marriott nearby, finding the impersonal, sterile room to be rather comforting. Comfort wasn't what I wanted. A battle room is what I desired. With a renewed sense of purpose, I opened my laptop and slid my fingers across the keyboard. It was there when I went into my bank account, which I had given them access to. The little frequent withdrawals I was accustomed to witnessing weren't the only ones. I found it by scrolling back 3 months. A transfer via wire. A single, enormous $750,000 wire transfer to a title company. The date was exactly the same as my mother's initial statement that Ryan was considering real estate. My breath caught. My vision became hazy. I had the money. To purchase a lake house for my brother, they had stolen $750,000 from me, money I had bled for in late nights and stressful meetings. Then they threw me aside like a piece of trash after giving me a glare. I took the phone. I spoke steadily and uncannily quietly. When my firm's private client banker responded, "David, it's Ethan. I need you to do something for me immediately. The joint account ending in 4758, I need you to revoke all access for Margaret and Thomas Callahan, and cancel all scheduled future transfers from my primary account, effective immediately." David answered, "Of course, Ethan," in a tone that exemplified professional prudence. "Consider it done. Is everything okay?" After saying, "Everything is crystal clear," I hung up. It was a defensive, self-preservation action. I convinced myself that it was only about halting the damage and safeguarding the remnants of my devastated finances. I still hadn't made up my mind to attack at that point. I had no idea that the lake cottage was only the first step in a larger rabbit hole. Unaware of the creatures that hid in the shadows below, I stood on the brink of an abyss. My first 24 hours in that hotel room were a haze of coffee, room service, and the glaring blue screen of my laptop. There was no sound on my phone. My family has not called or texted me. It was as though I had just vanished, and they were totally okay with it. That silence validated everything and was more damning than any claim. I wasn't related. I served as a resource. Additionally, I was disposable now that the resource was secured in the form of $1 million lake property. On the second day, I didn't recognize the number that called, breaking the silence. My heart pounded against my ribs as I gazed at it. I let the voicemail go. A message appeared a minute later. My mother gave it to me. My hand shook a little as I hit play. Her voice filled the room, laden with rehearsed fear and fake tears. Ethan, honey, it's Mom. I don't know what happened. We were at the grocery store buying some things for the lake house, and my card was declined. It was so embarrassing, Ethan, right in front of everyone, and the bank sent an alert that the mortgage payment wasn't scheduled. Did you do something? Is something wrong with your accounts? Please call me, baby. I'm so worried about you, baby. The term made my stomach turn. The acting, the phony worry, was brilliant. The smooth transition to me as the possible issue and her as the victim. She had spent decades honing the script. I didn't respond. Couldn't. How would I respond? Yes, Mom, I cut you off because you stole nearly $1 million from me and then had Dad disown me. I was left speechless by the bald-faced madness of her call. I knew I was in over my head at that point. I had to deal with more than simply family strife. I couldn't even begin to speculate about the possible legal repercussions of this momentous financial occurrence. I knew that charging in blindly would only burn me, but my wrath was a raging fire. I required a strategy. I required experts. I had to change my perspective from that of a hurt son to that of an investment banker. The hostile takeover of my own story was suddenly the most significant transaction of my life. I called a man by the name of Daniel Park first. As a forensic accountant who could locate a single missing dollar in a pile of documents, he was a legend in the financial community. He was credited with making spreadsheets sing. I knew he was the greatest, but he was pricey. I located the number for his company and called. Mr. Park, I replied when his assistant interviewed me. My name is Ethan Callahan. I'm a senior VP at Morgan Stanley. I have a sensitive personal financial situation that requires absolute discretion and the highest level of expertise. I gave him a concise, business-like explanation of the circumstances, including the joint account, the illegal wire transfer, and the acquisition of a significant asset. I didn't mention Thanksgiving. Sharing it with a stranger felt too intimate and unfiltered. That was a vulnerability I couldn't afford to display. Daniel remarked, "I see," when I was done. His calm, analytical voice was a comforting salve for my jangled nerves. "This is more common than you'd think, Mr. Callahan. Greed makes people do ugly things, especially within families. My goal here is simple: to trace every dollar, document every transaction, and give you a complete, undeniable picture of where your money has gone. I will be your financial bloodhound." I said, "What do you need from me?" "Complete, unfettered access to all of your personal and joint account statements for the previous 5 years. And a retainer?" I answered, "You have it," without hesitation. "Whatever you need." I felt as though a burden had been lifted when I hired him. I had never taken any proactive action before. I was now a client, rather than merely a victim. This wasn't just me. My phone buzzed with a text the following day as I was returning to my deserted apartment in Manhattan. Ryan sent it. My blood froze. With my hands on the steering wheel, I pulled over to the side of the road. The message said, "Heard you stopped by. Too bad you couldn't stay for dinner at the new lake house. It's amazing, you should see it sometime." The winking symbol. It was a match put on a gallon of gasoline, that small pixelated face. It was a psychological warfare masterclass. It wasn't merely arrogance. It was a victory lap. A taunt. In the mansion he had purchased with my money, he was rubbing my face in the dirt, completely knowing that I now knew about it. He wasn't merely taking pleasure in his gains, he was taking pleasure in my suffering. In a burst of white-hot wrath, the last remnant of uncertainty and misdirected familial allegiance vanished. Getting my money back wasn't the only goal here. Justice was at issue here. Daniel gave me a call the following morning. There was part of the detached serenity gone from his voice. A keen edge of professional interest took its place. "Ethan, I've got the initial analysis done," he said. "The $750,000 transfer for the house is clear as day. The documentation is sloppy. They were overconfident. But there's something else, something much more concerning. I'm seeing a pattern of smaller regular transfers from your joint account to a corporate account for a business called Nate's Premier Auto. That's your brother's dealership, correct?" "Yes," I replied, feeling my gut clench. "Well," Daniel went on, and I could hear him tapping on the keyboard. "These transfers don't look like normal business investments. They're structured in a very particular way. We're talking multiple transfers a week, almost always between $9,000 and $9,900. They're deliberately staying just under the $10,000 federal reporting threshold. A shiver ran down my back. That was referred to as smurfing or structuring. It was a tried-and-true method of evading financial regulator inspection. Daniel remarked, and it gets worse. I've pulled his business's financial statements. I'm seeing corresponding international wire transfers going out from his business account to shell corporations with accounts in the Cayman Islands and Cyprus. These are not payments for auto parts, Ethan. This is a washing machine. I muttered, money laundering, my words tasting like ash. Daniel said, it has all the hallmarks of it. This is bigger than a family dispute, Ethan. The lake house might just be the tip of the iceberg. The funds from your account were likely used as seed money and to maintain cash flow for a much larger operation. My professional opinion is that you're looking at a potentially serious criminal enterprise. The expansive vista of Central Park from my 50th floor window seemed far away and surreal as I reclined in my office chair. An illegal business. My brother was the ideal youngster, incapable of wrongdoing. And my parents, the devoted martyred people I grew up with. Did their love for their favorite kid cause them to be uninformed or complicit? I nearly burst out laughing at that thought's naivete. This was no coincidence, either in terms of the structure or the sheer size of it. They were aware. They knew, of course. They were the ones who had brought him up, helped him along the way, and profited from him at every turn. A rush of nausea swept over me. This was becoming unmanageable. A stolen nest egg was no longer the only issue. The account that had been utilized to finance this had my name on it. I, Morgan Stanley's Ethan Callahan, might be involved. All of a sudden, my future, my license, my career, was on the precipice. My thoughts were racing. I still held on to the desperate, stupid hope that this was all some huge, horrible error. That Ryan was simply making stupid, but not malevolent choices, and was in over his head. That he was being blindly enabled by my parents. With a thin, aloof voice, I heard myself say, Daniel, hold on. Let's not jump to conclusions. For now, let's just focus on the personal funds. Let's just track what they spent on themselves. The vacations, the shopping. I need to think. Ignoring this won't make it go away, Ethan, Daniel replied in a stern but sympathetic voice. You need to decide how you want to proceed. With my heart beating frantically against my ribs, I hung up the phone. The earth beneath my feet was collapsing, and I was standing on the precipice. I was forced to choose between risking my own career collapse and letting them get away with it in order to preserve some warped, shattered notion of family. Or should I jump to see what was waiting in the abyss below, even if it means taking them all down with me? I still lacked the guts to take that risk. I continued to pray and hope for an excuse not to. An explanation that would never materialize. I spent a week living in suspended animation. I left for work. I chaired meetings. I looked at market patterns. I've put on my professional mask. However, it was all a charade. Daniel was sending me encrypted emails that contained details of my true existence, each one a new spreadsheet and a new entry in the lengthy, vile ledger of my family's treachery. He complied with my requests and solely considered his own expenses. It was a horror show, though. A $5,000 Gucci buying spree for my mom. A pair of Rolex watches worth $15,000 for both parties. My parents and Ryan received a $30,000 first-class vacation to Italy, complete with social media pictures of them toasting champagne glasses. Posted only a few days after I gave money for a plumbing emergency repair. My money, paying for a life I wasn't even asked to see, much less live. However, everything was clouded by the bigger subject of the dubious corporate moves. Daniel's caution about a criminal operation encircled my thoughts like a thorny vine, smothering any chance of a straightforward solution. Was I shielding criminals? Was I culpable since I did nothing and wanted to keep this a family matter? An unexpected source provided the tipping point, the instant that propelled me from indecision to definitive action. Daniel was meticulously attempting to build a comprehensive financial picture of the family in order to comprehend the entire extent of my losses. During one of our calls, he stated in a strictly academic tone, Ethan, do you know of any other significant family assets, inheritances, trusts, anything like that from the past decade? I need to understand what they legitimately had in order to understand what they've taken. Deep within me, the question rang a harsh, resonant chord. My maternal grandmother, I uttered softly, my mouth feeling heavy. She passed away about 10 years ago. Her name was Eleanor. She and I were very close. In a home where I always felt like I had to prove myself, my grandma Eleanor was my haven, It was she who freely offered love. The only person who actually saw me was her. She would spend hours listening to my stories as a child, including those concerning school and my aspirations to move to New York. I got my first proper suit for a high school debate tournament thanks to her. She had exclaimed, "You look like a captain of industry, Ethan," with pride glimmering in her eyes. "Don't you ever let anyone make you feel small." Her late husband's prudent investments mostly contributed to her modest but comfortable estate. In the solemn days following her funeral, I recalled my parents informing me that she had bequeathed the majority of her wealth, almost $2 million, to Ryan. My mother had squeezed my hand and murmured, "It's what she wanted, honey," her eyes brimming with crocodile tears. "She knew you were going to be so successful on your own. She always said you had the Midas touch. She wanted to give Ryan a little head start in life." It had hurt at the moment, a sharp, deep agony of being passed over for the final time. I'd accepted it though. It matched the family story. Ryan was the one in need of assistance, while Ethan was the independent one. Daniel drew me out of my trance and asked, "And this inheritance? Did you ever see the official will?" "No," I said, feeling a weird chill creep up my back. "My parents handled everything. They were the executors." The person on the other end of the line paused. "I think you need to see the will. Not a copy from your parents. An official court-certified copy from the county surrogate's court where your grandmother passed away," Daniel remarked to Ethan in a kind but stern tone, akin to a surgeon delivering bad news. The chilling sensation became a surge of ice fear. I took a personal day the following day. I was aware of the terrible irony when I informed my office that I had a family emergency. In the little town where my grandmother had spent her last years, I made the 2-hour drive to the county courthouse. I completed the request form with clammy hands, and my signature resembled a stranger's handwriting. The clerk, a woman who appeared bored, accepted the form silently and vanished into a back room. I waited for what seemed like an eternity. She brought back a thin, beige file with yellowed pages. "Callahan Estate," she murmured, thudding it loudly. The scent of dust and old paper filled the air as I carried it to a peaceful nook of the records room. I could feel the hammering of my heart in my ears. I got the file open. I looked for it among the whereas and hereby that make up the thick legalese. The last proclamation, how her assets were distributed. "I give, devise and bequeath the entirety of my residuary estate, without encumbrance or condition, to my beloved grandson, Ethan Martin Callahan." To Ethan, to me. With a gentle rustle, the file dropped from my numb fingers and onto the floor. The world fell silent. The $750,000 for the lake house wasn't the only amount. It wasn't the incessant lies or the wasteful spending. This was it. They had stood with me at the funeral of my grandma, whom I loved above all others, and they had lied while looking me in the eye. They had stolen my entire past, created a phony will and falsified documents. My final relationship with the only member of my family who had ever shown me genuine affection. While I was feeding them thousands each month to keep their heads above water, they had stolen $2 million that was legally mine and used it as the seed money for Ryan's illegal business. The sorrow was so great and so deep that it went beyond tears. The air in the room was sucked out of my chest like a black hole. This was not an act of treachery on Thanksgiving. My entire life had been a betrayal like this. I was a different man when I left the courthouse. The dreadful enlightening fire of the truth had wiped out the injured son who had suffered over reporting his family. And tool of cold, unadulterated justice took his place. Just like clockwork, my phone buzzed. I didn't identify the number that sent me the video message. As stated in the text above it, "From your neighbor Mrs. Whitaker." She said, "You should see this. Please be careful, son." I hit the play button. The video was time-stamped on Thanksgiving Day, minutes after I had drove away, and it was blurry, obviously from a security camera. It was aimed at the front yard of my parents. After watching my dad shut the red door, I turned to face my mom and Ryan, who had come out onto the porch. They were all giddy with uncontrollable laughter. I was shocked the first time I saw it. My blood froze as I saw it a second time. As my spirit turned to stone, I watched it a third time. Margaret, the martyr who was my mother, wiped a fictitious tear of laughter from her eye. "Oh, the look on his face," she said with a crisp, clear laugh that was captured on tape. "You were perfect, Thomas. So cold." With a vicious smirk on his face, my father growled. "He served his purpose. He won't be a problem anymore." Then my brother Ryan, the king of his dilapidated little castle, threw an arm around them both. He uttered the words, "Don't worry, in a condescending tone. The cash cow might be gone, but he left us a mansion full of milk. With their laughing resonating in the chilly November air, they headed back inside after clinking imaginary glasses. I didn't think twice. I dialed the phone for my lawyer, Julia, with very steady hands. It was time to let her hunt since she was a shark and the best litigator in New York. Change of plans, I stated in an emotionless voice. Julia. We're no longer on the defensive. I inhaled deeply to regain my equilibrium. They didn't just steal my money, Julia. They stole my entire life, and I want it back. Everything. The following 48 hours passed with the swiftness and accuracy of a military mission. My lawyer, Julia, was amazing. With a grim, focused attention that was both frightening and reassuring, she took in the fresh information. The stolen $2 million, the forged will, the security camera footage. High above the city, in her sterile contemporary conference room, we met. She touched the certified copy of the actual will and stated, "This changes everything, Ethan," in a steely voice. "This is the linchpin. This isn't just a financial dispute anymore. This is felony grand larceny, forgery, and conspiracy. This is a slam dunk, not simply a case, especially when combined with what your accountant has discovered." Her piercing eyes met mine as she halted. "This is a racketeering case." The phrase lingered in the air, menacing and heavy. Racketeering. It's the kind of term you hear in mafia films, not in relation to your annual Christmas card sending family from suburban New Jersey. With coffee in hand and a chilly sense of purpose, we worked into the night. We put everything together in one scathing dossier. Clear charts that trace the flow of my inheritance money through Nate's Premier Auto and offshore are part of Daniel Chen's forensic investigation, which has now been extended to include money laundering. The highlighted and annotated side-by-side comparison of the faked will and the authentic one. An affidavit from me, notarized and sworn, that details every dollar stolen and every lie I've spoken. The video file from Mrs. Whitaker, a digital record of their evil intent, is the crown prize. Agent Torres, who works in the FBI's white-collar crime section, was the man we met. He was a towering, commanding guy with weary eyes that had witnessed every conceivable form of human avarice. The place we sat in was sterile, government issue, and had a stale coffee odor. With an inscrutable mask of professional cynicism covering his face, Torres listened to our presentation in silence. He had witnessed family conflicts in the past, with sons and daughters leveling irrational charges. Julia made her point as precisely as a surgeon would. Daniel used his laser pointer to guide him through the financial maze, emphasizing the offshore accounts and structured deposits. Julia then flipped her laptop over. "And finally, Agent Torres," she stated, "the defendants, in their own words." She hit the play button. The calm room was filled with the faint sound of my family laughing. Torres narrowed his eyes at the television and leaned forward. He saw my brother's cocky declaration about the cash cow, my father's ruthless smile, and my mother's exuberant joy. He saw it all. He then gestured for Julia to play it once more. He leaned back in his chair and gave me a look when it was done the second time. I noticed a glimmer of something in his weary eyes for the first time. It wasn't sympathy. It was a tired sort of acknowledgement. For the first time he realized I wasn't just another unhappy heir. I fell prey to a long-term, well-planned scheme. "Mr. Callahan," he said in a gravelly voice, "we've had Nate's Premier Auto on our radar for a few months. Suspected vehicle export fraud, shipping stolen luxury cars overseas with false VINs, big money. Very messy. But we were missing the funding source. We couldn't figure out how he was bankrolling the operation." He drummed his finger across the thick dossier. "You just handed it to us on a silver platter." He got to his feet and held out a hand. "Thank you for coming forward. Take courage to do what you just did. We'll take it from here." The next days were the quietest and most painful of my life. I had no idea when or how the storm would break, but I knew it was coming. I was living in a condition of suspended dread while going about my daily activities. I cringed every time my phone rang, thinking it was one of them, somehow conscious of what I had done. A week later, on a Tuesday morning, the call came in. Agent Torres was the one. "Ethan," he stated in a serious tone, "just wanted to let you know. Warrants have been served this morning, multiple locations." After hanging up, I switched on the television. And there it was. A squadron of black SUVs was seen swarming the lake house, which I inherited, according to live aerial footage. The scene was clear despite the camera's shakiness. Tactical-clad FBI agents were pouring onto the site. As Ryan was carried out in handcuffs, the camera focused on his face, which was a mask of unfathomable hatred. Without his trademark smile, he appeared pitiful and little. After that, the feed shifted to my childhood home. The hospitable red door stood fractured close to the lock, wide open. Thomas, my father, stood on the porch, his face slack and pale with shock, his shoulders drooping in defeat. On either side of him stood an agent. Margaret, my mother, was led out a moment later. This time, her face wasn't acting. The delicate patient matriarch's meticulously crafted facade had been destroyed. Raw, nasty dread was all that remained. Using terms like multi-million-dollar vehicle export and money laundering ring, raids in 3 counties, seizure of assets, and multiple arrests, the news anchor's voice continued to ramble. No one ever mentioned my name. I was an unnamed source, a ghost in the justice system I had started. With a glass of water trembling in my palm, I saw it all from the sterile silence of my apartment. There was no happiness. No victory was achieved. Just a huge empty space where a family once existed. Then came the most bizarre part of all. With startled eyes, my father looked up as the agents were loading him into a car and noticed the TV helicopter hanging overhead. He was aware that everyone was observing. A sudden desperate rage twisted his expression. With a harsh voice he yelled, "It was him!" and gestured back to the residence where Ryan had been taken into custody. It was all him. He was going to run with all the money and leave us with nothing. He told us. He's the monster. His face was captured on video for an excessive amount of time. The last piece of the puzzle came together in that instant. It was more than just a criminal family. Each viper in the nest was prepared to turn on the others in order to protect themselves. My father wasn't only a complicit party. An idiot. He had been on the point of betrayal himself. They were all being buried in the debris as the lies upon which they had based their lives finally collapsed. I turned the TV off. There was complete silence in my apartment. It was the sound of both the beginning and the end. I observed the aftermath from a distance, but it was a storm all its own. Although my name was not included in the first reports, I had to provide formal testimony as part of the judicial process. In the world of financial news, the tale generated a minor sensation. The family of a well-known banker is connected to a large fraud ring. The rumors were wild, and the headlines were graphic. Morgan Stanley, my company, was really helpful. Their top legal counsel summoned me in for a meeting. With the support of Julia's painstaking documentation, I presented the complete story. Within a week, their internal inquiry exonerated me of any misconduct, acknowledging that I was both the main victim and the informant who had exposed the entire scam. They provided me with all the resources I required, including paid leave, and protected me from the media. My managing director had told me, "Take care of yourself, Ethan," with sincere concern in his eyes. Family is complicated. The actual fallout, however, wasn't professional. It was intimate. Calls from a blocked number were the source of it. Answer the county jail's calls. Ryan's was the first. I agreed to it because I was morbidly curious and needed to hear it for myself. His voice had lost all of its natural sweetness and was now a poisonous hiss. He spat out, "You son of a..." crackling over the line. "You did this. You ruined us. You were always jealous, weren't you? You couldn't stand that they loved me more, that I was the one who got the breaks." "The breaks?" I inquired in a low voice. "You mean the $2 million you stole from my grandmother's estate?" On his end, there was a sputtering sound. He growled, "You'll pay for this, Ethan," as he recovered. "I don't know how, but when I get out, you're a dead man. I swear to God." With composure, I hit the end call button. Nothing could be said. All he knew to do as a cornered animal was to bite. His character was as hollow as his threats. My father called me a day later for the second time. He didn't sound angry. It was terrible. It was confusing, horrible. His voice was weak and aged, and all he murmured was, "Ethan. Why? She was your mother. I'm your father. We're your family. You don't do this to your family." I flatly retorted, "You told me you didn't have a son, Dad," putting a mirror up to his own statement. The static and commotion of the jail filled the extended pause on the other end of the line. At last he said, "It was for your own good." A lie so flimsy that it was obvious. "Ryan. He was into some bad things. We were trying to protect you from it all." With a laugh devoid of humor, I said, "Protect me? By stealing my inheritance? By letting him use our joint account to launder money? By throwing me out of my own home?" I left the questions open-ended. You weren't protecting me, Dad. You were protecting your investment. Your golden boy. Turns out he was about to cash you out too. Goodbye, Dad. I interrupted his pitiful poison by hanging up before he could respond. That night came the last call. The one I had been anticipating and dreading. My mom was the one. With my heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest, I allowed the phone to ring 4 times. It was a lifetime for each ring. Then I responded. She had perfected her performance over the course of 32 years, and her voice was a flood of frantic tears. Ethan, oh Ethan, thank God. Baby, you have to help us. This is all a terrible, terrible mistake. My face remained fixed as I listened to her spin a desperate, frenetic story. Ryan was solely to blame. They were poor, plain old people, and he had deceived them. What he was doing with the dealership was not clear to them. He had forced them into everything, including the lake house. Like me, they were victims. She simply loved her son too much as a mother. Was I unable to comprehend? A ghost of the young child who merely desired his mother's praise was practically palpable to me. I recalled being ill with the flu one day when I was 7 years old. She had spent the entire afternoon sitting beside my bed, applying cool cloths to my forehead and reading stories to me. Was that also a lie? I hesitated for a split second at the remembrance. Her voice shifted as she hesitated, feeling a fracture. Please, baby, she pleaded, lowering her voice to a whispery plot. You have the money. You can hire the best lawyers. You can make this go away. Just tell them you made a mistake. Tell them you were confused. We can fix this. We can be a family again. That was it. A chilling clarity took the place of the hesitation. Her initial reaction, even now, was to ask me to tell lies for them, to compromise my morals for their convenience. I gave her space to finish. Let the final cry reverberate through the quiet. After that, I inhaled, saying, I saw the video, Mom. The crying abruptly stopped. There was a dead gap of stillness on her end. I went on. I saw you laughing, in a voice as steady and serene as a frozen lake. I heard you call me your cash cow. I heard you say how perfect Dad was when he threw me out. The phone rang with a stifled gasp that sounded like a fish being dragged out of water. My final blow was, and I saw Grandma Eleanor's will, I said. The real one. The one that left everything to me. The $2 million you stole from me the week after her funeral, while telling me how much she loved Ryan. Now there was such a deep silence that I could hear the prison phone system humming. She couldn't speak. There was nothing more the master manipulator could say. The victim's supply of lies had run out. On Thanksgiving Day, I continued quietly. You made your choice. However, every word was a nail in our relationship's coffin. You told me who you were. And I finally believe you. This is me making my choice. Her voice was a pitiful murmur, the final sigh of a dying force. Ethan, please. After saying goodbye, Mom, I hung up the phone. I placed the phone on the countertop. The city lights outside my window were glimmering like a million cold, distant stars as I stood there in my quiet kitchen. Anger was gone. Don't worry. A vast, silent, complete emptiness. After 32 years, the bonds that had shackled, suffocated, and defined me were finally broken. I was totally by myself. And I was free for the first time in my life. The ensuing year was spent in silent, methodical reconstruction. I was no longer in charge of the faraway engine of justice that was the judicial case against my family. I testified in a number of depositions, narrating the facts in a cool, collected voice that seemed to belong to someone else. I had the impression that I was discussing a fictional character rather than my own life. The world had a particular expectation of me. Either a broken man, lamenting his family, or a vindictive son, reveling in his triumph. I wasn't either. I was just starting over from scratch. I listed my penthouse in Manhattan for sale as one of my first actions. Once upon a time, the expansive flat with its expansive views served as a tribute to my accomplishments and a sign of my success. It felt like a golden cage now. A monument to a lifetime of attempting to win the respect of undeserving people. The sale went through fast. I didn't turn around. I relocated to Brooklyn to live in a family-friendly neighborhood with parks and a smaller, cozier apartment. It featured a tiny balcony overlooking the bridge and space for plants. Compared to the penthouse, it seemed more like home. Additionally, I began visiting Dr. Evans, a compassionate and perceptive therapist. I initially refused, convincing myself that I was capable of handling it alone. I had always lived by the same old script. However, I broke down during our first session. I finally gave myself permission to release the 32 years of emotional baggage I had been carrying in her peaceful office, which was filled with books and soothing lighting. I discussed the ongoing pressure to be flawless, the isolation that comes with being the one with the ability, and the ingrained worry that has plagued me my whole life. The feeling that I am somehow essentially unlovable. During one session she informed me, "You weren't their scapegoat because you were flawed, Ethan," and her words struck me like a physical blow. "You were their scapegoat because you were strong. They needed someone to carry the weight of their own inadequacies, their own failures and deceits. And you were the only one in the family capable of doing it." Her remarks were enlightening. My entire past was reframed by them. Because I was weak, I wasn't a victim. It was my resilience that made me a target. It was not my responsibility to bear the burden on my shoulders. It had never been. A few months later, my lawyer Julia called to inform me of the final ruling. Ryan was found guilty of fraud, money laundering, and racketeering and given a 15-year sentence in federal prison. Thomas and Margaret, my parents, were both sentenced to 8 years in prison for conspiracy and grand larceny. In his sentencing remarks, the court had been especially severe on them, pointing to their own son's deep and deliberate financial and emotional betrayal, despite the fact that he had been nothing but giving. "Thank you for the update, Julia." I did not get a sense of triumph after hanging up. Just the calm turning of a heavy page, the ultimate, definitive conclusion to a difficult chapter, gave me a sense of closure. The inheritance, not the jail terms, was the most significant aspect of the deal. The $2 million, along with 10 years of interest, was given back to me following a protracted civil lawsuit that ran concurrently with the criminal prosecution. The funds remained undisturbed in a different account for some time. Because of the long history of dishonesty around it, it felt like blood money. It wasn't what I wanted. Then, while I was seeing Dr. Evans, I had an idea. I refused to allow them to taint my grandmother's heritage. I was going to take it back. Julia and I collaborated to create a non-profit organization. In memory of my grandma, we named it the Eleanor Foundation. Its goal was clear and straightforward: to offer pro bono financial and legal assistance to senior citizens who had fallen victim to financial fraud, especially by family members. I established the first endowment with the $2 million that was retrieved. It was a means of turning the most repulsive aspect of my tale into a source of inspiration. By defending those like her, I was able to pay tribute to the only member of my family who had ever genuinely loved me. My managing director at Morgan Stanley summoned me into his office a few months after the foundation's creation. "Ethan," he said, "we've been impressed with how you've handled everything, with your integrity and resilience. We have an opening in our London office. Executive Director. It's a big step up. A chance for a fresh start. A new city, a new continent, a clean slate." I didn't even need to consider it. The cosmos seemed to be finally coming into harmony with the new course I was attempting to take. I answered, "I'll take it," and for the first time in what seemed like forever, a sincere smile appeared on my face. I felt lighter than I have in years as I packed up my Brooklyn flat. I wasn't escaping my history. I had confronted it, broken it down, and grabbed what was mine. I was now moving in the direction of my future, which I was creating on my own terms, based on honesty and morality. I was standing in the bright, warm kitchen of my Kensington, London apartment 1 year to the day after I had stood on that chilly doorstep, alone and rejected. The aroma of my mother's turkey and the underlying stress of a family get-together were not present in the air. It was filled with the sound of easy, sincere laughter and the beautiful sense of the food my friends had prepared. I was celebrating Thanksgiving. Over the past year, a lot has changed. My life's greatest choice had been to relocate to London. I cherished the city, its history, and the cadence of my own unique way of living. Even while my work was gratifying and difficult, it no longer defined who I was. I no longer felt that I had to put on bulky armor to prove my value because of my achievement. I was only doing my job. I surveyed the table I had prepared. No blood relations were present. This was a distinct kind of family, one that was created voluntarily, rather than by birth. There stood Mrs. Whitaker, her gentle eyes glimmering with a youthful joy. She was my honored visitor, and I had flown her out first class. When I offered her, she said, "I've never been on an airplane before," and her unabashed happiness was contagious. Even I had forgotten the story she was telling about my early years while she held court. My forensic accountant, Daniel Park, and his spouse were present. Spreadsheets and depositions had brought us together, and a true relationship had grown between us. I appreciated his passionate sense of justice and sharp wit. With a knowing smile, He lifted his glass across the table to me. My lawyer, Julia, was also present. In a battle I never intended to fight, she had been my general and my pillar of support. She was simply my friend tonight, and she was sobbing from laughter at one of Daniel's jokes. Along with a straightforward note, my therapist, Dr. Evans, had given a lovely arrangement of fall flowers. To fresh starts and new customs. You have my admiration. I scooped up my drink as we all sat down, the laughing fading into a friendly buzz of discussion. Everyone fell silent and turned to face me with smiles. I don't have a big speech, I said in a clear, steady voice. I just want to express my gratitude to everyone. I felt like I had lost everything as I was standing outside a house I believed to be my home a year ago. I believed that my entire life had been based on falsehoods. I looked directly at these individuals who had been kind, loyal, and honest to me in my hour of need. The therapist who helped me recover, the professionals who spoke up for me, and the neighbor who looked out for me. But I was wrong, I added, my lips forming a genuine smile. I didn't lose a family that day. I escaped a prison. And in the years since, I've learned that real family isn't about the blood you share. It's about the respect you give, the trust you earn, and the truth you choose to live by. I used to think my value was something I had to prove, something that was measured by the numbers in my bank account or by the approval of others. Now, I know my value is measured by the peace in my own soul and by the people I'm lucky enough to share my table with. And that's something no one can ever steal. I lifted my glass. I said, to the chosen table. To new beginnings. We clinked our glasses together, the sound of crystal echoing in the warm air, and a chorus of "To the chosen table" reverberated around the room. I felt entirely, wholeheartedly, and genuinely at home for the first time in my life.